Yeah, so sorry, I don't know why his microphone is not working. No, but I can swap. Yeah, you're hearing my microphone now. You're not hearing his microphone.
Yep.
Oh no.
It says it's working when I do the audio check, though. It's the confusing thing. Okay, hang on. I'm going to do some tech swapping here. I don't know what you're doing.
Dance.
Dance. Take a shot. No. What the?
It's mine. It's mine. It's fine. I don't. That's the only emote I know. Get the ball opener over there. Being.
Thing is like, hey, there's food there. I want to have food.
Oh, give me your fang.
What?
Okay, I think it's you now. I think your mic is working.
Okay, wait. Okay, can you hear me now? Is it working? Can someone hear me now? Hello? Hello? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone?
Yeah, I can hear you trying to put the dog down.
Okay, all right. Okay, so it's working now. Oh my God. Shot. So this thing's getting a little sticky. We got to clean that off. This week we have Salacious Crumb and the Star Wars shot. I don't know where he came from. Well, I mean, he came from Jabba's palace on Tatooine, but I don't know. Yeah, this is from like the 70s. Thank you to our longtime Patreon subscribers, Chris Lee and Karen Lee Duffel, and longtime supporters, Yuffie and Ori Winkler. Tastes good. So, as always, give us a shout out in the comments. Let us know you're here. Got a question or anything? Let us know. And so, this episode was kind of inspired by a piece I read on Vox this week, Vox.com. And it was, the president has COVID-19, and he seems to have, I don't want to say recovered fully, but I mean, he's up and he's walking around, and he's obviously not on a ventilator or anything. And so, probably, I don't think much would change before Election Day. But on the other hand, there were these questions about, like, what would happen if a presidential candidate passed away before the election, right? And so they actually had a kind of a bunch of scenarios where, whatever. They had a bunch of scenarios gamed out where, like, what would happen if a presidential candidate sort of passed away, like now or then or whenever. And so I kind of thought we would be fun to talk about that stuff, sort of a bunch of like hypothetical, what might be and how these scenarios might be resolved, sort of a thing.
What I told you talk about was the electoral process and the electoral college.
Right. Well, that ties into this. Dara wanted a more big discussion about the electoral college and stuff, which kind of ties into this. Oh my God. Oh my God. There's so much going on now. You got the legs of the tripod. Are you just getting Olivia's microphone?
Yeah.
Okay. Can everyone still hear me? Am I still working?
Yeah, you just went wonky.
I say it's fine. All right. It's wild. Okay. All right. So the first, there's a couple things that you have to understand about the American electoral system, right? The first is that the states run all of our elections, right? And so even though in Florida there is a federal election for like the entire Florida delegation for the House of Representatives and the president, that election is actually run by the state of Florida. The state of Florida has a Secretary of State, and each county has a county election supervisor, and each city has its own municipal election supervisor, and they run the elections. They get a budget. They get volunteers or poll workers. They get locations, polling places. They have machines, and they print ballots and stuff. And so when I was an undergraduate in college, I used to vote absentee, and so did all my roommates. And we would all kind of get our ballots at the same time, and they would all be completely different, right? Because one of my buddies was voting from Hillsborough County, and I was voting from Duval County, and so on. And you would be complete different. And that's because each county in the state has its own separate way of doing things. And so in each state has its own set of rules, right? And so some states allow early voting, some don't. Some states do, for example, a bunch of states will mail you a ballot if you're registered to vote automatically. And if you can just mail it back to them, or you can physically bring it to the voting place and just fill it out and turn it in right there. Like if you want to just vote in person on the day of the election or whatever, right? And so every state kind of does it a little differently. Right, which on the one hand is interesting and fun, but on the other hand also leads obviously to problems in the past where historically the South, for example, didn't allow African Americans to vote, and that was generally not a thing the federal government interfered with for a long time because the sort of running the elections and the voting and stuff in the states is the sort of state's business, right? So a lot of the peculiarities of the American electoral system reside in that fact, in the fact that the states just sort of do their own thing, right? And that's why if you run for president, one of the things that you do is you hire a person who knows how to get you on the ballot in all 50 states. Because every state requires something different. Some require cash, you have to pay a fee. Some states you have to have signatures and they have to have a petition to get you on the ballot. Every state has a different filing date, and you have to basically have a guy whose job it is to handle ballot access so that you're on the ballot. For example, Kanye West is sort of running for president, and he's actually on the ballot in a few states. But when he announced that he was running, in some states, it was too late for him to file. And so it wasn't just possible. He can't be on the ballot in all 50 states. On the other hand, a friend of mine got her absentee ballot in Iowa mailed to her, and he was on that ballot because they had apparently done whatever you have to do to get on the ballot in Iowa. And he did, right? Whatever, pay $500 or whatever, right? And so every state has its own weird peculiarities, which is, of course, a feature of the American system, right? Not other countries aren't like that. France handles their elections at the national level, Germany, whatever, right? And so another thing that you have to understand is that we have two sets of elections in America, the primaries and the general election. The general elections are run by the government, but again, the state and municipal governments. The primaries are run by the parties, although generally working in tandem with the municipal electoral authorities, right? And so for a long time in the South, for example, the parties, particularly the Democrats, simply just banned black people from serving or being in the primaries. And they were allowed to do that because the federal courts repeatedly ruled that that's discrimination again. But on the other hand, the parties run their own primary elections, so it's not, we don't really have the power to tell them to force you have to include everybody. And of course that changed after the civil rights movement in the 1960s, particularly with the 1965 Voting Rights Act, right? And so that sort of adds a layer of complexity because there's a lot of different moving parts in terms of an election, right? So the other thing we have to mention about the presidential election specifically is, of course, the Electoral College, right? And this is where things begin to get wild. So when the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution, there was a lot of tension between what they thought of as a democracy and a republic, right? And in a republic, you vote for people who run the government. And in a democracy, everybody votes on everything, right? Everybody, it's like plebiscites and whatever, right? And no, you can't really have a true democracy. Sarah's banging something on the floor. You can't really have a true democracy in the absolute sense unless you have a little town of 50 people, because frankly, you can't vote on everything, right? I mean, it's just impractical to have everybody vote on everything all the time, right? I mean,
225 years ago.
I mean, yeah, there's an argument. There's a great science fiction author, Alastair Reynolds, who actually envisioned a society he called the Demarchists, the Democratic Anarchists. And everybody in the Demarchist society has a little brain implant. And whenever the AI that runs their government needs a decision, it just stops everybody and sends them basically an email and says, you have to tell me whether you want to do A or B or whatever. And so in that sense, everybody does vote all the time because you have to. And it's also, it happens painlessly, and it just takes 10 seconds and you just vote. And then the AI will be okay, well, 60% of people said they want to do this, so we're going to do that, right? And that's just the way that works. And so, the framers sort of thought a lot about that. And you're going to fall somewhere in the middle, but they lean more towards the republic. We have democratic institutions, but you the Senate and so on, you elect people to run the government, and you there's a tension in representation in the government where I vote for my senator and member of the House, and I send them to Washington to represent me. So should they do whatever I want, or should I trust them to do what they think is right? And of course, it can run into a problem where if you're a member of the legislature, let's say you have a position that's unpopular. You're like, well, I know my voters back home probably don't like this, but they like elected me to run the government. So like, should I do this thing that's maybe unpopular but right? You know, and like, you know, you can sort of go back and forth as a representative about whether you think you should simply be a mouthpiece for whatever the majority of your constituents like, versus, you know, they elected you to make choices as an autonomous moral agent, and you'll just try to do the right thing and maybe like justify it afterwards, right? And so like, there's definitely like some complexity in understanding exactly the way the framers thought of our government, right? But when it came to the Constitution, they vested a lot of power in the legislature, and to that end, even the legislature is involved sort of in the selection of the presidency, right? They created this thing called the Electoral College. Sarah, can you not keep throwing stuff on the floor? You're killing me. It's okay. It's already on the floor now. The damage is done. The Sistine Chapel is already shattered. Okay. Okay, it's a lot of pick-me-pop action going on. Okay. Yeah.
Really nice.
There's just a lot of wine in there. And also, my hand. This hand is the hand I normally drink with, but it's sticky because I haven't wiped this down yet, and I got expelled a little bit the other night. When I was drunk the other night, I did get some liqueur on the outside of this, and it's sticky. So, and that's on my hand now, and there's nothing I can do about it. Wipe. No one is getting that, but Dara and I are longtime fans of Monk, and that's a line from Monk. Wipe. Well, yeah, it's Sharona. Wipe. Actually, I prefer to think of Dara more as Natalie, who was sarcastic and competent. Yeah, and hot. So, can I help you, cat lady? Okay, run directly in front of it. And wait, okay, bye. Yeah. She appeared in a. That was Olivia dressed as a cat. Oh my God! Thank you, wipe. No, she appeared once in a preview video where I picked her up and held her in front of the camera and put her down. So for reasons, we kind of wanted to keep her off of this whole thing. If
Not working out completely.
no, well, if she wants a YouTube channel in a real way, so when she gets a little older, she's gonna have one. She put whatever the hell she want on that. Within obviously reason. Okay, I mean, in anything really crazy, YouTube's gonna take down anyway. I mean, it's not North Korea, right? And you know, what is nudity, advocacy of terrorism and violence, talking about North Korea? All of those are red flags for YouTube, I guess, right? And so, having said that, let's talk about the Electoral College, right? And so this is this sort of wild, kind of crazy thing. But the way it works is that when we vote for president, we actually, the government convenes a body called the Electoral College, and the Electoral College actually selects the president, right? And so, and the thinking is that when you vote for president in the 21st century, I mean, Sarah literally can't carry both, and now she's fighting with her shoes. Where are you? What are you doing? Okay. Don't go in my office, Olivia.
No Pringles.
Don't go in my office. Okay. And so it's like we get them quiet because they're upstairs, but then we go upstairs. It's like fucking World War III. Gaming animals? Okay. Okay. What's up, Lucas? Gaming. Well, they're animals.
Shout out to Gemma, who's voting for the first time this year.
Oh, is she on the chat? Yeah. Shout out to Gemma, who is a first time voter.
New citizen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Welcome to the United States of America. Sorry, it's a complete mess. Unfortunately, the country you left is also a complete mess. So,
Counting on you to help fix this.
like help fix this one, right? I mean, she missed out at least because in previous British elections, like the last election was you had Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. So it's a complete crazy guy and a complete crazy guy. And it's like, what do you pick, right? You pick Comrade Corbyn, who's going to, like send us to the camp, the work camp for Stalinism, or you pick Boris Johnson, who's the second least trustworthy politician in the modern age. Now, at least on the end, Labour has Keir Starmer, who's not a moron and not a liar. And so you could feel pretty comfortable voting for him and be like, okay, whatever. This guy seems like he's got his crap together, right? But of course, she can't do that now. Now she's here, and it's like, well, welcome to the weirdest election of the modern age. And so the thing about the Electoral College is that when you vote today, you vote as a state for delegates, and the delegates will then go to the Electoral College and vote for who the president is, right? And so to be the president, you have to have 270 votes in the Electoral College because there's 535. 435 for the U.S. House of Representatives and 100 for the Senate, and they're divided up among the states exactly the same as the votes that they get in the legislature. 2 senators and then however many members of the House that you get, right? And so and when you vote, like some states do it different, but in Florida, for example, whoever wins a majority of the votes in the state of Florida on election day, or mail, you use absentee, whatever, will end up getting all of Florida's like 27 electoral votes. Yeah, I don't think that 538 is called 538 because there are 538, but I don't believe those 3 extra people are voting members because there's a Puerto Rican delegate, there's a Washington D.C. delegate, and there's like a Guam delegate, and that's why you get 538. Yeah, there's a couple overseas territories that have a delegate, but and like Washington D.C. has a delegate to the House of Representatives who is elected by members of D.C. But don't vote, which is a thing that they want to change. Some people want to change. Yeah.
At the electoral college, usually like a senator or
No, we'll talk about that. Tim asked who are the delegates in the electoral college. We'll talk about that. And so the first thing you have to understand is first past the post. If you win, if there's a million votes in Florida and you win 500,001, that is to say 50% plus 1 vote, you get all of Florida's delegates. You get all 27, right? Now, I want to say 2 states do them proportionally. Nebraska and Maine each have a delegates awarding system where they award them. Nebraska has 3 members of the House and 2 senators. So in Nebraska, if you win the popular vote in Nebraska statewide, you get the 2 senators, you get those 2 votes. Each of the other 3 votes goes to the winner of the votes in that district for the House, right? And so Nebraska is divided into 3 districts. I assume it's like roughly a third of the state each way. And so it's possible for Nebraska, and it does occasionally, split their electoral votes. It would either be 4-1 or 2-3. Right? Someone would either carry the statewide vote and get 2, and then carry 1 or 2 of the House districts, or whatever, right? And so that's entire. Maine does the same thing, and so that's very interesting because it changes the way that the presidential campaign works. Because thus, it's possible to campaign in a state like Nebraska that you're going to lose the statewide vote, and possibly you would get like the part of the city that's more liberal if you're a Democrat or whatever, right? But most states do not do that. In fact, 48 states, as far as I know, don't do that. And so it's first past the post, right? And so having said that, the way that works is so like hypothetically, you have Florida. You win. You're the Democrat. You win 500,001 vote. So you get the majority. You won more votes than anybody else. You have a majority. You get all of the delegates, right? And so the way it works is each party provides to the state of Florida a list of delegates that they want sent to the Electoral College. And in the event of you winning, they get your delegates, right? They essentially go to your party. And so like right now in Florida, there's a list of Republican Party delegates, Green Party delegates, Libertarian Party delegates, and Republican Party delegates. And what is happening? But I'm just fascinated to know. Okay, and so having said that, are you all right? I mean, you okay? All right. There's a lot going on, and so essentially, what happens is I don't think anybody saw you. You like commando crawled. Okay, good luck going through the minefield. And so, like if the Republican wins, like Donald Trump wins, then the state of Florida will just go to the Trump campaign and say, okay, give us your list of delegates, right? Like tell us, and they'll just say, here are 27 names, right? And they probably have some alternates in case you get sick or you're not available or whatever. And then they just call those people up and say, oh, and understandably, you're on that list ahead of time. And so, like on election night, if Donald Trump wins, you're like, I should expect a phone call, right? Like they're going to call me and have me go up to Washington. And so the way it works is that on December 12th or something it's early December after the election, the Electoral College assembles in Washington D.C. and all of the delegates from all 50 states they go and they vote. They cast their votes, right? And most of the time, it doesn't really matter because the Electoral College represents the popular vote, right? You win the popular vote, you win more than 50% of the total votes in the country, you win the Electoral College, and so everybody goes and a majority of people cast a vote for the guy that won, and the whole system is just sort of like not really noticeable. It sort of happens under the weather, under the radar, and it's just like, okay, well, we all voted for like Joe Smith, and Joe Smith won, so like off we go, right? But this does produce some weird, wacky effects in the American electoral system, right? For example, there are a lot of Republicans in California by number, right? There's a pretty big number of Republicans in California, but no Republican ever spends time and money campaigning in California because a clear numerical majority of the state's most motivated voters are all Democrats. And so if you're a Republican and you have a limited campaign budget in terms of both time and money you could spend, you're not going to fly to California and go campaign in like rural Northern California in the hopes of picking up a few votes, because you're not gonna defeat all the liberals in like San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles, who are going to obviously vote, right? And similarly, if you're a Democrat, there's a lot of votes you could pick up, for example, in Texas, in Houston, and in Dallas, and in Austin, but not enough to make up for the entire rest of Texas. So again, you're not, you have a limited amount of time. You gotta have some breaks when you campaign. You can't campaign every day. So you're just going to say, you know what, I'm going to campaign on a state that I think is winnable. And as a consequence, most American political contests at the presidential level tend to focus on a small number of states, right? What they call battleground states or swing states that are A, worth a lot of electoral votes, and B, possibly could vote either way, and thus mean that a candidate could spend his time and money there profitably attempting to get those electoral votes, right? And so,
I was laughing because Gemma said she needs diarrhea.
oh yeah, I mean, this is real. I mean, this is complicated. The good news for Gemma is that if you're a first-time voter and you're super excited about voting, and you're like, I am a Democrat and I live in, Montana, it's like, guess what? Your state's going to go Republican. It's very, but like you live in Florida, and Florida is a swing state, a battleground state, and so your vote is hugely consequential. Right? And so Florida, interestingly, tends to be divided into three sections. Northern Florida, north of I-4, which is basically north of like Daytona, Tampa, Orlando, tends to be Republican. Florida south of I-4 tends to be a Democrat, and the I-4 corridor that runs from Daytona through Orlando to Tampa tends to be the part that flips. And generally, all those people, whoever they vote for, gives that side a majority, right? If they vote Democrat, then them plus South Florida. If they vote Republican, and so everybody watches the I-4 corridor like intensely. My in-laws right now are experiencing. They live in Orlando, and they're probably getting telephone calls, text messages, and TV ads at the rate of like 700,000 a minute, because Florida is very close. The polling is pretty close in Florida in the 2020 election. Yeah, and so does Alachua County and Gainesville tend to also be pretty blue, but those are dots, and otherwise, like the rest of North Florida tends to be pretty red, and that's pretty expected.
Evan said north of I-4 wins all the good stuff for the rest of us.
I mean, north of I-4, you get some really rural areas.
All you have to tell him is that we're about 10 degrees cooler than he is.
It's I mean, it's quite temperate here, Evan.
Now you're going to get a nasty reply.
Yeah. What's up? What's up, Evan? I mean, he's gonna come up here and be mad about it. Okay, so having said that, in fact, in this election, the swing states are Iowa, I want to say North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, maybe Virginia, and Florida. And those are the states that are sort of been like, they're close enough to where either the Democrat or the Republican could plausibly win them, right? More or less every other state in the country is in fact pretty much probably going to lean either Democrat or Republican on the map. And there's still some surprises. Famously, Donald Trump picked up the Midwest, the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan in 2016, which no one expected him to do. Right, and that could still happen, right? I mean, if you look at any projection like on CNN or 538 or whatever, they give you percentages, and the states, most of the states, except for the ones I just mentioned, tend to fall into this will probably be Democrat or surely will, or this will probably be Republican or surely will, right? And so, in fact, most elections in America at the federal level tend to be decided by a very small number of states, which is why you hear a lot about which way, like Virginia or like Florida or Ohio. The big ones that when I was a kid in the 90s was Ohio and Florida. In these days, you occasionally Colorado became much more Democrat over the past few election cycles. So did North Carolina and Virginia. Obama notably won North Carolina and Virginia, I think, both times. Pennsylvania too, right? And so, having said that, that's sort of the weirdness of the Electoral College, right? And if you're a Republican and you're campaigning, you think, okay, I don't really need to go to Texas because they're all probably going to vote for me, and I don't really need to go to places like I don't really need to go to like Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota because they're all probably going to vote for me, and there's not a lot of people there, right? I mean, you win South Dakota, you get 3 electoral votes. Which is less than you would get, campaigning in like Los Angeles if you're a Democrat or something like that. I mean, but that the Electoral College then, they all go meet in December and they all cast their votes, right? And Tim asked earlier, who are these people? Basically, they're party loyalists, right? I mean, they're people who the party likes, and they can be anybody. I mean, they can. There's no reason. I think there's probably. I think the electors have to meet the same qualifications as members of the House or something like that. There's something similar says they have to meet certain qualifications. But other than that, they can be literally anyone the party selects, and it can be like a favor they give you if you're a donor, if you're like a person who volunteers, or if you're a person who works with the party. And of course, the assumption is you will, if you're like the Trump campaign lists you as a delegate and Trump wins, you go up to Washington, and then when the Electoral College meets, they say, okay, who do you support? And you're like, well, I mean, Donald Trump, right? I mean, like, I'm a Republican, and they sent me here, right? And so electors that don't do that are called faithless electors. And in theory, an elector in the Electoral College could go in December and vote for whoever they wanted, right? It has never changed an election. It is never, in the 2016 election, there was a record number of faithless electors, 9. And so, and what happened was, it was a bunch in Washington State. There were like 3. One guy voted for a Native American candidate, and one guy voted for Bernie Sanders. And there was a couple people in the South who voted for some. There was a couple people, and a few, I think, in like out west voted for somebody else. But it was not enough to numerically change. It's not enough to numerically alter the outcome. And the Supreme Court actually heard a case this year or last year where states passed a law after 2016 to punish faithless electors. In other words, if like the Libertarian Party sends you to Washington and you go and you vote for somebody who's not the Libertarian Party candidate, then the state should be able to levy like a $10,000 fine to prevent you from doing that, right? And the Supreme Court upheld it and said, like, okay. And Elena Kagan wrote the opinion, but she was like, at the end of the day, if literally every, like, it would be basically be all of them, right? I mean, if 2 people refuse to support, like Joe Biden in 2020, and he like. It's like, oh, okay, instead of having 300 electoral votes, he has 298, he still wins. No one's going to punish those guys. And of course, the other thing is your name is now mud with your party, right? I mean, like, it'll be on record that you did that. So if you go to the next Democratic Party meeting and you didn't vote for Joe Biden in the Electoral College, they're not going to want you to be involved in the party. Right? You're not going to run for office. It's going to haunt your career. So everybody kind of figured that's enough punishment. But if it doesn't change the election, like, are they really gonna send you to court or something? Probably not. And then Eleni Kagan pointed out, if enough electors flipped to change the actual outcome of the election, are you really going to punish like 200 of these guys, like 250 people? Right? And it would be totally chaotic if you did that. It's never happened before. In the entire history of the Electoral College, there's never been a moment where the Electoral College delegates apparently colluded amongst themselves and said, hey, let's all vote for, Bob Hope instead of either of the 2 candidates. And then like he gets enough to win. And it's never happened, right? And so that's why throughout most of American history, the Electoral College pretty much mirrors the popular vote, right? I mean, that's it. Yes.
Evan asks, can the governor or FCC of the state send electors who echo against the will of the voters?
Yes. This is where things get touchy. Who picks the electors? In theory, if the okay, well, let's talk about so we sort of talk about the Electoral College, right? We have the delegates, and they go vote, and they vote in December. And then a couple of days later, or like a week or 2 later, the Congress, and it's in January, actually, the new Congress that was elected in 2020, in 2021, will actually certify the Electoral College vote. They actually, it's like they get a report, they read it, and they say, this is okay. Like, we stamp, we approve. And it's sort of unclear if they don't approve, that's never happened. So would you have to rerun the election, or it's not really clear? But in theory, they look at it and say, this seems fine. Like this person won the majority of the votes or whatever. They won the majority of the electoral votes. And so we should mention, by the way, in a number of occasions in American history, twice recently, the winner of the presidential election won the Electoral College by a majority, but did not win the majority of the popular vote. In 2016, Donald Trump won the Electoral College by a reasonable majority and lost the popular vote by, I think, 3 million votes. Right, which can happen, right? You can win, you can lose the popular vote dramatically in a bunch of states, but you can win the popular vote narrowly in a small number of states to get enough of a majority, and then you lose the overall popular vote, right? And so, like, probably Donald Trump didn't do very well in, for example, California, but he won like Michigan by like 50,000 votes, right? And so you can understand why someone would thus get a lead in the Electoral College, winning a bunch of states narrowly, but then the states where they lose like 60-40 or 70-20, 70-30, and then they don't end up winning a majority of the vote. It happened in 1996, and it happened, one of the other times it happened was, there was once in the 19th century in the 1880s, and then again in 1876. No.
Al Gore less popular.
Al Gore won the popular vote.
I mean, look it up. Al Gore may. I don't remember. I don't think it happened. I know it happened in one of the Clinton years. And so, of course, this is always very frustrating for people because they're like, "Oh, more of us voted for whatever." And it's like, that's true. But remember, you're not voting for the president. You're voting for a delegate to go vote for you on your behalf. Right? And so, and it's crazy. And of course, because the Senate, the U.S. Senate, overrepresents the population of rural states. Yes, executive.
So it was narrow. George Bush had 271 electoral votes and 47.9% of the popular vote, and Al Gore had 266 electoral votes and 48.4%.
Yeah, so it was unbelievably narrow in that sense.
Narrow, but
Yeah.
Al Gore had the popular vote, lost the election.
And of course in 2000, the fact that Georgia, like the winning state was Florida, right? Florida was contested, and if Al Gore had won the state of Florida, he would have won both the popular vote by a large margin, or quite a narrow one if he'd only gotten like another couple thousand votes, and then he would have won the Electoral College by a pretty comfortable amount. Weird, yeah, weird, and.
Yes.
And the chair of George W. Bush's campaign in the state of Florida was the Secretary of Elections for the state, Secretary of State, Kathleen Harris. Yeah. So, and she gave a whole briefing where in Florida law, there's a whole thing about if there's a hurricane, and there's a whole briefing on CNN where she was like, look, if there's a hurricane in the next week, like there's a bunch of rules that Florida has, and everybody was like, are you serious? And everybody in Florida was like, yeah, yeah. And so. Having said that, there's a lot of sort of arcana about this, right? So let's discuss what would happen if a presidential candidate died, right? Because that's a thing. I found that Vox article sort of fascinating when the stages of when the candidate dies. Okay, so first, what happens if a presidential candidate dies during the campaign, right? Well, remember, the first part of the campaign is the primaries, right? Now, the primaries are actually really recent. The first primaries were at the turn of the 20th century when progressive reformers wanted to move the selection of candidates out of the proverbial smoke-filled back room and basically make them elections. And that seems pretty fair, right? I mean, we should just say, look, Democrats in Ohio, who do you think should represent you in, Congress? And instead of having party bosses like pick from a preferred list of crooks, we just let anybody could run, right? And dating back to that time, a lot of states have laws about ballot access that are really designed to ensure that people, the elections people can't gatekeep the elections, right? Like they can't, there's one law, it's in Wisconsin, Paul Ryan, who was the vice president in 2012, he actually had to run for both his House seat and the vice presidency because in Wisconsin, once you were on the ballot, and he qualified for the ballot well before he was nominated for the vice presidency, you cannot be removed from the ballot under any circumstances, full stop. And so he was like, whatever, I'm not running for the House, I'm running for the vice president. But he won he lost the presidential election and won the House, and so went back to the House, right? But in Wisconsin, it was actually illegal for him to take his name off of the ballot because you just can't. And that's to prevent party bosses from taking a reformer off the ballot because they don't like him or whatever, right? And so this also coincided with the constitutional reform that allowed people to vote directly for their senators. And so the first time in the 20th century, early 20th century, you could vote directly for your senator instead of the senator being selected by the state legislature. And remember, the state legislatures tend, like, on the one hand, they could pick anybody they wanted. They also tended to pick people who weren't heroically unpopular with the voters in the state, because I might not be able to vote for the Senate, but I can vote for you, member of the state legislature, who picked a guy I hate, right? And like that could be a really big problem for you if you pick someone who was like notoriously unpopular, right? And so over the course of the 20th century, the primaries slowly expanded. By the 60s, there was a pretty good number that were like important. There was famously the New Hampshire primary that everybody kind of had to go enter just to sort of. California had a primary, was a big state. That was a big one. Remember, Robert Kennedy was assassinated minutes after winning the California primary in 1968, which was a big tragedy, right? And so, but on the other hand, you could also, the big thing was your political advisors would go do polls, and they would do town halls and focus groups and stuff. And if they didn't think you'd win a primary, they would tell you just don't enter it, right? And then, so you'd be weird. You'd go to the convention, and the delegates that you won in various primaries or were pledged to you, like your home state or whatever. So you had a lot of people that would end up with delegates, right? And so you could have a convention where like 80% of the delegates were unpledged to any candidate, but some of them were pledged to a couple of different candidates. And then there'd be a floor fight, a big, where they essentially every delegate votes. We see if anybody has a majority. We take a 30-minute break. We do it again, and then we see if there's a lot of wheeling and dealing and so on. And that's why until relatively recently in American history, the party conventions would actually determine who the candidate was. We would like if the convention was August 3rd, on August 2nd, like we wouldn't know who the nominee is going to be, right? We wouldn't know. The Democrats, who's going to run for president? I don't know. And then on August 4th, like we would know, right? They would pick somebody, or like 5th or 6th, where they'd pick somebody. And so sometimes it was the obvious candidate, and sometimes it would be like in 1920, it was Warren G. Harding. Nobody had ever heard of the guy, right? First-term senator from Ohio, who mostly got his jollies having sex with a woman who wasn't married to him. Right? They would go to the lake, and he would write her letters about how, remember that time we got wet at the lake? Not in the lake? What? It's weird. And so, I mean, like, you get a guy like Harding, who was not a political insider, but got chosen at the convention there was a deadlock. And basically, after voting and voting and voting, they were like, none of the candidates that have been proposed are going to be successful, so let's just pick somebody else. And they picked this guy out of the blue. That would never happen today, right? I mean, it would never. You would know the convention. And so by the 80s, after Watergate and everything, the primaries really became a thing. Activists in both parties focused on the primary, because if you can win the primaries, it's like more people like you, right? I mean, like, it's hard to argue with a person who's capable of winning the primaries. Also, they have a good chance at winning the election. They obviously won all these primaries, right? They compete in all these elections. That makes sense. Are you right there? Okay, so having said that, the primaries really became more of a thing in the 80s and the 90s. And of course, the big thing was the Iowa caucuses became the first primary. The calendar is very interesting. Iowa is the first primary. It happens in January of the election year. It's a weird caucus where it's not a primary. You go to every Iowa voter has a caucus site they go to, which is like a gym or something. And you go, and there's this whole really bullshit procedure where you stand in the room and they say, okay, everybody. And there's like every candidate has like a corner or like a space. And then when they like blow the whistle, everybody goes to the candidate that they want. And like the weakest candidate gets eliminated, and there's a whole big argument, and there's like shuffling. And it's this really weird public thing that's really kind of totally fucking crazy. Nevada has a caucus system as well, right? And so the first actual election is New Hampshire. But it's funny because Iowa is really, really, really more white than most other states in the country and more conservative. New Hampshire is libertarian and a very small state, so it's also like not representative. And then you have South Carolina is the third one, which is a state with a huge African-American population and is also pretty conservative. And so those states tend to be like watched like a hawk, right? Iowa is called by campaign workers idiots out walking around because in the election year, you go as a volunteer and you knock on doors and it's like fucking freezing, right? It's like -80 and you're banging on doors. Jimmy Carter drove a beat up truck all over Iowa in 1975 and knocked on every single door in the state, which is how he won the Iowa caucus. And he did, and it proved that he was capable of winning the presidency, right? Obama did the same thing. He organized all over the state. He had meetings and stuff. He gave speeches, and he won the Iowa caucuses in 2008, which was like a huge shock. The Clinton campaign was not prepared for that, and it pulled the rug out from under him that this guy that they weren't expecting won the Iowa caucuses, right? And then of course there's Super Tuesday, where like 10 states or 12 states have their primaries on the same day, which can be definitive, right? And those tend to favor heavy money campaigns because you can't campaign in all of those states all at once. Like Iowa and New Hampshire are fascinating because a candidate without a lot of money can just move into a motel in Iowa and campaign all over the state. Right, Rick Santorum, who won them in 2012 by a very slender margin, decided weeks after the election. Rick Santorum lived in the state for 2 months, and he didn't have any money, but that's okay. It doesn't cost anything to knock on doors. But on Super Tuesday, where you have all of these states all at the same time, you really have to have some cash. You have to buy TV ads. You have to get endorsements. You have to run radio ads. You have to be political figures in the state have to give you the nod. You got to be friendly with the state senators and congressmen and stuff. And that really favors guys who have deep pockets, right? And they all happen on the same day. But a lot of times the Republicans like to decide elections on Super Tuesday. And it's sort of like, look, we're done, right? So. Dara, can you check the level of quiet upstairs? Yeah, it's just very. Oh, the shot's coming. Should I also have a shot?
I certainly do not want a shot. Okay, you want the Hope or do you want CSI?
CSI, isn't that the one that's a mug? No. Okay. We have a shot glass that's a mug, which is the ugliest looking thing, but it's a little mug. Yeah, it's just like shots. That stuff is just like. Do we have any comments?
Chris wants to know if you think the electoral college will ever go away.
That's a good question. Well, the first question, we'll talk about that. We'll get there. That's a really good question to ask. It's very topical now. Why the primaries are on different days? Okay. The answer is the primary system didn't happen at the drop of a hat, right? It wasn't like all the states sat down and said, let's have a primary system, you guys, and make it fair. Okay. Instead, they sort of evolved gradually, and it sort of was a bullshit. So, it's just bullshit. They just kind of created them. And there was a big race to have the first primary because look at Iowa, for example. If you're from Iowa, I like you and you're a great person, but frankly, nobody gives a shit about your state, right? It's a square state. It's freaking cold all the time. You get corn. Herbert Hoover's from your state. Nobody cares about the state, right? I mean, it's just not important. But yet Iowa occupies an incredibly central place in American political history because every 4 years it's the first primary. And well, they had a straw poll at Ames, and it's bullshit because whoever spends the most money wins the Ames straw poll, and it doesn't matter. It's like 9 months before the election. Who cares, right? The list of Ames straw poll winners totally does not correlate with the list of Iowa caucus winners, which itself doesn't correlate with the list of presidents, right? Is honey not vegan?
Honey's not vegan.
It's natural. But it's not like. But I mean, you have to take the honey from the bees because they can't have too much of it. It's sort of symbiotic that you take the honey from the bees and they make more. That's correct. Cows need to be milked.
Well, the problem with cows that I will argue against, why you can argue.
Well, they do give them drugs to make them lactate all the time.
Also, they cut off two of the udders.
Yeah.
Because the machinery is four instead of
But
six, and they will pull the calf away prematurely so that I get that one. Whereas bees make more honey than they do.
Right. And there's a whole thing about ugly vegetables. Like we had to eat ugly vegetables so they throw them away. And it's like, no. On farms and stuff, they take the ugly vegetables and they feed them to pigs. And a huge part of the ecosystem is pigs turning surplus food that we don't eat or not going to eat into pig flesh and manure, which we also use for fertilizer and stuff. So it's like that's part of the system, right? There's a whole thing about if we don't eat ugly.
It is when it's a smaller system.
Right. Well, when you factory farm it, the logistics. Anyway, food or whatever. Right. I don't want.
We can have a whole other lecture on food.
No, we're not gonna have a lecture, but I don't care about it at all. Right. Fast Food Nation is okay. Eric Schlosser, we like it. He's got a good book too, Command and Control about nuclear bombs. It's really good. But I would argue that you could make there's a certain in between. There's I guess it's not veganism, but you could argue ethical food consumption or something. If you had locally sourced honey that was produced by a small honey operation, it would not be unreasonable to eat that. I mean, then you're really getting into I have to source all my food. And then you're there's the Portlandia sketch where they go to eat dinner and they're we'll have the chicken and they bring out they're this is Bruce. He was your chicken that you're eating tonight. And they're did they love Bruce? Did they hug him? Did he have a good upbringing? Did he have a good life? or was he sad? Did he like run around? And then it's like getting into the ridiculous.
Chrissy also points out that ugly fruit
Right, yeah, ugly fruit gets turned into juice. They turn it into like any fruit product that is like in any food, like juice or pie or something, is ugly.
fermented. Well, I mean,
Yeah. Because I mean, we expect it to look a certain way in the grocery store, but like it doesn't in pie. You're not going to know what the apple pie. Who knows what the apples looks like? All that cares is if they taste the same or whatever, right? Yeah. Well,
potatoes are ugly.
so yeah. Anyway, ugly fruit is a whole thing, right? But there's a whole part of the food cycle where the animals just eat the waste, right? So okay. Anyway, why are the primaries the way there? Well, because of course Iowa wanted to have the first primary because otherwise nobody gives a fuck about Iowa, and if it's the first primary, everybody gives a fuck about Iowa, right? And so it makes sense. And of course, there was a whole thing in like 2012 or whatever, where the states all started shuffling their primaries forward as fast as they could.
Yeah,
It was 12.
Florida didn't count.
Yeah, they counted us half as much because we moved our primary before Super Tuesday, and they were like, "Bitch, get in line." But we were like, "But we're Florida. Why Iowa is?" But it's like, but Iowa already did it. Yeah, Iowa already did it like 20 years ago. So just shut up, right? And so the reason to answer your question why the primaries are the way they are is because they just sort of evolved that way, and then once the system got set that way, we just didn't want to touch it. And there's a point where you'd be having all the primaries like the year before the election.
Gemma approves strongly of the food grant. She'd like to hear more of that.
Oh, okay, well, we'll do a whole thing about food or whatever. Government agricultural policy. We got to talk farm subsidies. We got to talk about farms. I got opinions about farm subsidies. Yeah, circling back, right?
But if a big state like Florida, California was the first primary, that's going to eliminate most candidates right off the bat.
Right, it would be like California, for example, like a small, like you and Jimmy Carter in your truck, like you can't campaign in California. It's like that's a state you need big money to campaign in because you got to buy TV ads, you got to be like flying all over the state, you got to like go to stadiums and do rallies and stuff. Whereas like it was always thought that Iowa and New Hampshire lent themselves to like small candidate, like a level playing field. Right, but then you get a guy who like can't compete, but like he can knock on every door in Iowa, but he can't like it was what's his name the horrible guy who was the governor of was it Wisconsin or whatever? It was I forget, but he was supposed to be the next Ronald Reagan. He was going to be everything for us and for us Republicans. Oh my God, he was going to change the world or whatever. That's what the Republicans said, and he couldn't campaign worth the goddamn. Like you put him on a Scott Walker. Scott Walker was the guy. The Republicans are in love with that. The teachers, he fought the teachers who were like terrorists, and it's like, I don't know that I would compare defeating a teachers union to winning the war on terror, unless you think the teachers union was fucking Al Qaeda, you dipshit. There's a lot of people I don't like. Scott Walker's on the list. But the thing about Scott Walker is that he was the second coming of Jesus Christ and Ronald Reagan crossed together in a lab. Except when he got on the stage and was like campaigning, he was a complete fucking idiot. Yeah, he was not. Yeah, and he was like, he was going to be president, and he's going to be amazing. And then they got on stage and like, okay, go Scott Walker, and he was like, I'm a dipshit. Yeah, and like Beto was great when he was running in his House district, but like the national stage like didn't work as well. And so, like you could have a guy who could win Iowa, New Hampshire, but maybe isn't going to be competitive, somewhere else, right? South Carolina is usually the acid test because it's a bigger state, it's got a bigger population, it's got a lot of black people, not a lot of black people in New Hampshire and Iowa. So you could be a white dude and do well in the first two states, and then black people are like, we don't like you, and then you blow up, right? Particularly as a Democrat, that's important because all the black people that vote in the South Carolina primary, presumably you're going to want to get them to vote if you're a Democrat. So if you can't get them to vote for you, you're not going to do well as a Democrat, right? And so yeah, it is weird. If you had California as the first state, it would really privilege a campaign that had deep pockets, whereas like Iowa and New Hampshire really privilege the kind of like knock on doors, kind of really grassroots kind of thing. Absolutely, and that is really. It's weird how that, and you get what's called George H.W. Bush called it in 1988 called the Big Mo, which is the momentum, right? Big Mo, we got Big Mo going to New Hampshire, and it was like, the fuck does that mean? Big Mo? What the fuck are you talking about? But if you win Iowa, you're the front runner, right? Like, and it's like the assumption is you will win, and the more you win, the more money you get, the more attention you get, and it's like what? Pete Buttigieg did win Iowa. He did really well. And then didn't he pledge his delegates to Biden? He did pretty good though.
Hard campaigning.
I would not. It would not surprise me to see
You went to, like, Washington take down
I mean, no,
Fox
he
News.
did come into Fox News with that big dick energy coming into 2021, and he shut down the Fox News panel when they were all like,
Apparently that wasn't the right video either. He did it again.
he did it again.
He did
We got to
it.
find the other video
Yeah.
too. All right, because it was they're like Fox News bullshit, and Pete's like, well, actually, totally not that, and everyone was like, ooh, and they like didn't have anything bullshitty to say. They were
looked at
like,
each other like, anything else?
okay, guess that guy just showed us the door, so we'll just leave. Have a good day. Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Pete Buttigieg in a hypothetical Biden administration. Like, I don't know what cabinet post. I mean, like housing and urban development would be like his jam.
But he's not a.
What? What?
I have an inappropriate joke that I will share privately.
Oh, okay.
If
We-
it's negative on Pete, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, longtime audience member Corey is a big fan of Pete Buttigieg. She has strong Pete Buttigieg energy.
Reading all his books.
But yeah, I mean, like housing and urban development would be the thing that I would think he would be interested in if I was President Biden. I would be like, this is a job you'd like, right? That he would be good at and know a bunch of shit about. But on the other hand, like that's not exactly like a springboard to a great political career to be the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, right? But like I don't know, right?
I don't know, he could do good things.
Maybe you could do a bunch, and he's photogenic, he's telegenic, and he's got a what's that? Veterans Affairs, another because he's veteran. That's another one. And Veterans Affairs is more high profile because if you turn now, on the other hand, Veterans Affairs is like the Home Office in Britain. It tends to destroy people's careers. Right? You tend to go there, you manage it, but it's not like great. And then like you know, like Theresa May is the first British Prime Minister to come out of the Home Office in like 70 years. And it was only and her opponent totally blew it because she would have crushed Theresa May, but Theresa May doesn't have kids, and her opponent, also a woman, said, you know, I think if you don't have kids, you really don't have a stake in the nation's future. You're just sort of not really contributing to the rest of the country. And everybody's like, kind of fuck you, lady. And she apologized, and that ended her. That was the end of her. And Theresa May was the last person standing, basically. And so she won the primary. And it was, remember, it's a Tory leadership contest. It wasn't a general election. It was a Tory primary. Right? It wasn't a who said what now? I mean, I don't know that. I mean, Pete Buttigieg is pretty young and inexperienced to be Secretary of State. I don't know that I would.
But he does have to speak several foreign languages.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. I mean, he's yeah. But you also have to consider what would he be willing to take, right? Because he would not want to. You wouldn't be like Deputy Undersecretary of State. He'd be like, no, I'll just run for House in Iowa or Illinois again, right? Or Indiana. Yeah. Well, things change. That's why he said at the moment, right? Because if a Senate seat opened and the polling was good, you know, who are the senators from Indiana? Richard Burr? No, he's in North Carolina. Indiana senator. I don't know who the senators are. The governor. I don't know who the governor is because Mike Pence was not polling good in 2016 when he.
It was in the book, but it was at the very end.
Yeah. So yeah,
It says in the book he wasn't interested in the Congress.
it's. I mean, it is. Yeah.
Ron and Todd Young.
Who the first one?
Mike Braun.
Mike Braun. Yeah, there's a Georgia guy named Braun. He was a crazy guy. He's a crazy weirdo.
But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to deter you. So normally, if you win
Yeah.
Iowa or New Hampshire, you're going.
Because Rick Santorum won Iowa, but of course, ironically, Romney won it, and then a week later they were like, actually, Santorum did. But so Santorum was like, but you robbed me of the like I would have gotten fundraising and stuff. I would have gotten all this free media coverage because everyone would have been like, Rick Santorum wins Iowa, and this picture of Rick Santorum like winning Iowa, and he didn't get any of that, right? And so it is sometimes.
Well, in New Hampshire, they have the West Wing Hartsfield votes at midnight.
Right. And they have a county in Maine that does the same thing. It's like 7 people live in the town, and there's always a CNN guy whose job is to report how the 7 of them voted at like 10 a.m. They'll gather in the cafe, they vote by show of hands, and CNN is like, first voting in the nation on election day. And it's like, yeah, but it's some rural town in Maine with like 7 old people who gets shit. 7 old white dudes voting for like whatever, right? But yeah, like it's what it is. It's something for them to report on election day, but at like 8 a.m. when there's no news, and they're like basically check back in 12 hours when the polls close on the East Coast, and it's like, yeah, cool.
They're all hot on Klobuchar winning those 8 out of 12 votes.
Right, Amy Klobuchar did super great, and where'd the clob get? Nowhere, because nobody else liked her. So
Whatever. She's out there right now.
she's busting her ass for Joe Biden. We saw ads. I seen ads for her. No, it's and she would be another person that I might.
I mean, you don't have to like her, but I will appreciate that she is on board right now, busting.
Well, she would be another person.
Man.
She might.
I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now. now. Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, yeah.
Turtle man gave it away.
Turn-
He
yeah.
looks like a turtle.
He looks like a Koopa Trooper.
Don't say. I like Koopa Troopers.
Yeah. Well, you like the bad guys in Super Mario Bros.
What's wrong? They're just out there trying to get. Just a squirrel trying to get a nut, and the dude's jumping on their head. They're just walking back and forth.
But they always get the last laugh when they hit you with the damn shell. But
Well, yeah.
anyway.
But anyway. But yeah, Klobuchar is another person who I wouldn't be surprised to see turn up in a hypothetical Joe Biden administration, right? But anyway, so that's the primaries are this kind of weird ad hoc system, right? They were sort of added on top of the existing electoral college system, right? So what would happen if a presidential candidate died during the primaries? Well, what would happen is that was a question.
But is that a candidate running for the election or a new?
Well, of course, it wouldn't change much in the sense that if like Donald Trump, who was running in the 2016 primaries, if he passed away, well, Mike Pence would have become the president, and that would have been the official thing, and then unofficially, two things would happen, I guess. First, any state that could remove the candidate from the ballot would probably do so, right? I mean, and if you're far enough away from the election, you could just say to everybody, we're just going to take them off the ballot. Some states aren't allowed to do that, so you'd still have a ballot that had the deceased candidate on it, right? And in other states that had already voted, you'd end up with a bunch of delegates who were unpledged, right? I mean, it would be like, okay, well, we were all the delegates from Iowa. We were all pledged to vote for like John Smith, and he died. So I guess like we get released, and we at the convention we can vote for whoever. On the other hand, if the candidate before like if he got sick and pledged his delegates to someone else, they can do that. They can endorse someone and they can release their delegates, but like say you should vote for this candidate who I endorse. That could be something you could do if it's early on in the primaries. But that could be a very uncertain situation. If it happens early enough in the primaries, it wouldn't necessarily affect much. If it happens like in the middle or end of imagine if it had happened, for example, in 2008, when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were neck and neck through most of the primaries, right? They were, Barack Obama called the 2008 primaries like a really good movie that went on an hour and a half too long, or half an hour too long. Right? Because they like Clinton would win one, Obama would win one, Clinton would win one, Obama would win one. And so like if that happened, presumably, since it was basically a two-person race, like Clinton would just be like, well, I guess I'll just win the rest of the primaries, and then I guess I'm the nominee, right? And so that kind of makes sense. And it really depends on like when that happens. Now, then you have the convention. And remember, in the past, the conventions typically tended to be actually brokered, right? You would actually have delegates voting and choosing. Nowadays, it's a coronation, right? We already know who the candidate's going to be, and they give a big speech, and the balloons drop. And if it's 2000, Gore gives his wife the tongue on the stage, like because you're supposed to give your wife a.
Tipper was not a fan of that.
No, he gave Tipper the tongue, and it was like if you're going to have another child, maybe you do it in the hotel room, right? So because
It wasn't that bad.
it was pretty wild for a convention, is what it was wild for, right? And I'm not complaining because one of his daughters wrote for Futurama and was all right. Kristen Gore wrote for Futurama and she wrote jokes. So if you're gonna make another funny daughter, but like maybe you could just do it backstage behind the curtain where everybody needs to see that on TV, right? And like Tipper was all like, okay, cool, what are you doing? Oh my god, like you can't pull away from your husband on stage because it's like, okay, there's the news story for the next 3 days. So instead you have to just ride it out. But then you're like, this is weird. Like I guess you're excited that you won the convention that you expected to win. Like no one didn't think that you were or whatever. And so what would happen if the candidate died after the convention but before election day? That's a really wild scenario because the party could choose another candidate, but on the other hand, like and in some like legally, for example, like if Donald Trump passed away now after the convention before the election, Mike Pence would become the president, and the party could essentially say, if you vote for Donald Trump, like we're just gonna, like the states will just count it as a vote for Mike Pence, right? That could be a thing. The party could pick someone else, but it would be obviously they wouldn't want to do that at the last minute.
It'd probably just be like you voted for the incumbent, and now
And it's the incumbent, exactly. And there are circumstances where you vote for a dead guy. There was a Senate election in Missouri in 2000. The guy died in an accident. It was like a plane crash or something 3 weeks before election. And the governor went on TV and said, look, if you vote for the dead guy, who we can't take off the ballot, I will nominate his wife to the seat. And the dead guy won, and his wife took the seat, and she held the seat till the next election. And that's totally legal because in the state, the governor, each state has different rules, but in general, the governor can nominate somebody to fill vacancies. And so, no, Melania is not born in the United States of America, so you couldn't nominate her to be president. No.
Who is number two behind Trump Trump in the election?
Nancy Pelosi.
No,
Yeah.
Republican.
Mike Pence.
No. During the presidential primaries, who was behind Trump?
It was various because it was like 2012, for example, was fantastic because Mitt Romney got like very little support in the beginning, and there was a surge behind every conservative, and they would flame out because they're weird, and then Mitt Romney would pick up like 1%, and the rest of the surge would go to the next candidate. So it was like Michelle Bachmann, Tim Pawlenty, Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, and it was like rise, fall, rise, fall, rise, fall, and Romney just stayed in the race, kept his mouth shut. Rick Perry, Ron Paul. And then he just kept his mouth shut and then cleaned up in the end. It was like, look, you flirted with this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and I'm here. I'm your man, right? You're gonna marry me. I'm the boring one, but who cares? You're gonna take me home to mom, right? And so, having said that, Trump had a bunch of people who were like maybes. I forget who won. There was a ton of people. Carly Fiorina ran. Chris Christie ran. Lindsey Graham ran. Rand Paul ran. Marco Rubio ran. Jeb Bush ran. And everybody's strategy was to be the last guy in the room. Like, let Trump rip. Ted Cruz ran. I forgot about Ted Cruz. And everybody was like, when Trump goes after your buddies, you just look away and like let Trump do his thing. And he'll like, low energy Jeb, little Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, whose dad shot Kennedy. And like you clean up. And then the idea would be at the end of the day, one of us is going to end up being in the room with Trump. And we can be like, okay, this guy's nuts. Like, I'm a senator or something. Like, come on. And then you'd win and he'd lose. Except that's not what happened, right? Trump ended up last in the room and won all the primaries, right? And so I forget who it was. It was such a wild time. Because I know Marco Rubio was on the ballot in Florida. John Kasich was in it for a long time. He was he was okay. He was kind of a douche nozzle. John Huntsman, who I like, but no one who votes for. I'm the only fucking person that voted for John Huntsman. When
I'm not a Republican.
no, he was the governor of Utah and was their ambassador to China. Yeah, yeah, and he's got a daughter named Abby. I know about these weird things I know about John Huntsman.
Is the fan on? Okay.
Oh, thank God.
Well, it would have come down if the fan was on.
I was trying to get a book down off my top shelf this morning, and the fan was like buzzing my ear, and I turned the fan off, and then I got back up on my ladder, and when the fan stopped, it was like right here, and I'm like, oh, I'm pretty glad I did that, because if it had been any closer, it would have smacked me in the face. Yeah, it was like really loud, and I'm like, it's probably not safe, and I got down, and I turned off the fan, and then got back up, and it stopped, and it was like right here, and I'm like, it was a good choice. It was a good choice. It was one of the books I turned into the used bookstore. I mean, I turned in like 20 books. You saw that bag of books. I turned in like a bunch of stuff, and no, I had 11 in another a profile my mom had made, and I had like 25. So it was, I didn't get a lot of money for them, but and then I got four. And one of the books I got, some jackass in the first 20 pages of the book wrote a big long note at the bottom about what the page was about, every page. And so this page is about this. I opened the middle and was like, this looks good, and I didn't like flip through the whole book.
The highlights and the notes are always in the first part of the book.
And
It's up by the end when they stop reading.
Yeah. So I just got to bull through the first 20 pages it's about a book about Chicago Mayor Richard Daley.
No, wait, you weren't excited. You were excited about the governor, other dude.
Governor Morris. Yeah, because Governor Morris he introduced the Virginia plan to the Constitutional Convention for James Madison, which is cool. One of two Morrises that signed the Constitution, who were important, the other being Robert Morris from Pennsylvania. There we go. I like that rabbit. No, that's not that kind of rabbit. I saw a Baby Yoda meme, and he was holding a vibrator, and it's like when you find mom's lightsaber, but it won't stop vibrating. Ooh, Baby
I
Yoda.
watched that last night. I purposely unmuted it during my reading time.
To what?
Drank.
Drinks.
Background.
It's good. Good times.
There's no way you're watching The Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, "Why you watch Baby Yoda?" No, it was Mandalorian. I mean, we gotta. Yeah. Well, this is the side that has the round one. Oh yeah, we have this little thingamahooter. Yeah, look at this bad boy. Whatever. Fuck that.
It doesn't have a good grip.
No, it's fine. I'm probably gonna have more because this is a little. So, All right. So what would happen then? I mean, that's really, it depends, right? It depends, and each state has its own rules about ballot access. There's some states that would be like, you can't take the dead candidate off. You know, it would really depend, right? So what would happen if a candidate wins the election on November and then dies afterward, right? And it really, that's unclear. You don't become the president elect until the electoral college meets. But what if the Congress endorses the electoral college in early January? So are you the president elect when you win the election, when the electoral college votes you in, or when the Congress certifies the results of the election and the electoral college vote in January? Because if you're the president elect, then if you die, then the vice president just becomes the president, right? And then the vice president would just submit another name to Congress, and that'd be the new vice president.
They call you president-elect.
They call you president-elect. They style you as president-elect the moment you win the election. But when do you legally become the president-elect, right? I mean, like,
I mean, it's like when you get married.
yeah, like you get married and the officiant marries you, but you got to sign the marriage license before you. It's for real. Yeah. Well, and the marriage license isn't legit till we sign it. The notary notarizes it, and then they send it to the state, and the state like files it, and then it's legit. Then you.
Everybody's already calling you. Mrs.
Right. So yeah, there's legal questions about that, right? And so what if the president, and I guess in that circumstance, the vice president would just become the president, right? And so there's a whole other those two things that could happen, right? And this is where you get into some fun scenarios. What if the president passed away, and then the states could argue? There's a whole theory that the states could argue that the death of the president released the electors who were pledged to that person, and then the states could select new electors. And there's nothing to stop the states from just saying, well, these are electors that would be voting for someone who's dead, so we'll just pick new people, right? And they could pick new people that would support presumably a candidate of the same party affiliation, but they could also pick basically anybody. And Elena Kagan pointed out in her opinion in the case about punishing faithless electors, there's basically no control over that. The state of Georgia could just say, you know what? We're the legislature. We don't really like Joe Biden. He passed away in a tragic accident. So we're just going to pick a bunch of Republicans to go up there and vote for Donald Trump. And it would be obviously outrageous, but like there's nothing necessarily legally that would prevent that from happening, which is, I mean, we don't want anything like that to happen, right? But hypothetically, it could, and that's crazy town. I mean, it's crazy times that something like that would happen, right? And so it's not at all clear that there's any.
2020. Can you not speak things into the universe?
I'm sorry, Isa, come on, yeah, come here. No, the dog is. Don't lick her butt. Yes, Isa. I would like to salute Isa for waking me up several times last night. Okay. Yeah, your friend Tim's here. Why don't you go love him? Yeah. Yeah. Say get the butt in your face. Cat butt. Yeah, it does look like a cat butt. Sorry, Tim. How much was the case that you bought? It is a little bit like that. My case, I'm not a fan of my new phone case, but I figure I'll just when I see a cooler one. Isa, don't get on the thing with the cake plates. Do we have any questions or anything?
Paul wants to know when the last time you voted in the general for a Republican was. You don't have to answer. He says you have to answer. I said you don't have to answer.
Voting is a private thing unless you choose to make it public.
It was a long time. It was a long time. Yeah. You can tell him it was not long after I met him.
You can tell them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. Not long after I met him. He will know when that is.
I mean, I know for a fact you voted for a Republican in the general at least once after I met you. So.
Yes. Yeah. It's been a while.
And I had words about that one.
Well, I mean, and I didn't think it was that long ago, and then you think about it, you're like, it really was that long ago.
It was a long time
It was a long time ago. It really was a long ago. Isa, you want some champagne or whatever? No? Okay.
You knock the bottle over.
And so, having said that,
Don't let her knock the bottle
no,
over.
she won't. It's fine.
You knock my bottle over and we've got problems.
She's like, I'll do what I want. She will sleep.
I have flip-flops.
No, she will sleep on your shoes. She wants some headbutts. Give her the headbutts. Or she got the fingernails. Get some love. So a while back, somebody asked me. It was a longtime fan of the show. Chrissy asked, "Would the Electoral College stay forever?" Right? Is that am I remembering that correctly?
Everything that the Electoral College will go.
Okay. And the answer to that question is yes, possibly. To change it seriously would require a constitutional amendment. And you could do that. You could pass a constitutional amendment that says whoever wins the majority of the popular vote would become the president, right? And that would be a simple amendment. Now, it would be hard to pass that amendment. Understandably, for example, Republicans who see themselves becoming much less likely to win the popular vote going forward, but much more likely to win a minority of the popular vote, but a majority of the Electoral College, they might oppose that, right? On sort of partisan grounds. But there's another thing going on called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. It's National Interstate Popular Vote Compact. The National Interstate Popular Vote Compact has been signed by like 20 states or something, and basically it's an agreement that your state passes that says your state will vote. The legislature will vote to send delegates to the Electoral College in Washington, D.C. To support whichever candidate wins a majority of your state's of the national popular vote, not your state's popular vote. So, for example, it could mean that your state would be won by a Democrat, but your state legislature would vote to send Republican delegates to the national convention, the National Electoral College, because the Republican won 50% plus one of the popular vote. And the National Interstate Popular Vote Compact will only take effect once states that have a combined total of 270 or more electoral votes, that is to say a supermajority of Electoral College, have agreed to sign it. So in other words, once like a few more states have signed it, then all those states in theory will work, right? And of course, a court challenge would be inevitably in the offing, but I don't know that there's necessarily anything wrong with states essentially voluntarily agreeing to just the state legislature can choose whatever delegates it wants. But of course, there would be a legal argument if my state voted majority Democrat and the popular vote was majority Republican. Am I being deprived of my vote? Like there would be the case would be the voters would say, am I being deprived of my vote because they're doing that? And the answer is that actually hits right at the Electoral College, right? I mean that's sort of right at the argument of should we even have the Electoral College if the state legislature voting to send delegates that you don't agree with based on the state's popular vote violates your right to vote, then the Electoral College is itself not constitutional. But if a few more states ratify the National Interstate Popular Vote Compact, then it would actually take effect, and it would be very different. And an election run under the popular vote would be very weird because our arguments have been made over privileged money. Right? If you had a lot of money, you could reach more voters by having TV ads and internet ads, Facebook ads and stuff. But it would be interesting because if you're a Democrat, you might go to Austin, Texas, because everybody that votes in Austin now counts as part of your aggregate vote total. If you're a Republican, you might go to rural California. If you're a Democrat, you might spend more time in the South. Right? African American voters in Mississippi don't necessarily outnumber white voters, but there's enough of them to make a difference, right? I mean, like if the popular vote is all you care about, right? And so it does. The Electoral College does lend itself to some certain weird things, particularly what we call the first past the post system. If you get 50% plus one of a state's votes, you get all of the electoral votes, right? And so another thing that more states could do is more states could pass laws like Maine and Nebraska that divide their electoral vote up proportionally among the candidate that wins the popular vote of their electoral districts, which would be a change, right? It would mean that, for example, if Texas did that, there are a lot of counties along the Texas-Mexico border that are very heavily Latino that might vote Democrat. The big cities and the suburbs of Dallas, Houston, and like Harris County, Dallas, Houston, and Austin, they might vote Democrat. And so a Democratic candidate might expect to get, maybe 3 to 5 or 6 to 10 electoral votes from Texas, which would be significant. It would eat into the lead that a Republican is assumed to have already gotten starting by getting that state, right? And of course, as in a lot of states, in Michigan and in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, Wayne County is typically carried by whichever Democrat runs because of the city of Detroit and suburbs, but the rest of the state votes Democrat. So what you always It should be Republican. So what you always get is sort of, do enough people turn out in Wayne County to beat the rest of the state or not? Well, of course, if the state of Michigan did proportional voting, it wouldn't matter, right? Once Wayne County reaches 50% plus one Democrat, then the Democrats are just going to get those electoral votes, right? And the rest of the state's going to go Republican. It would really change. You'd have to almost run a mathematical model to figure out how much it would change the way the elections would run, right? But that would be fascinating. It would be fascinating to consider an election under those circumstances.
But the argument for that is, the vote Iowa itself may become obsolete because California is just going to completely.
But I mean, you got to look at California. California might actually send some Republican electors to the Electoral College. Yeah, northern and parts of rural California. As it turns out, in recent years, California has become more. Even the red parts of California have become purple. Orange County was the iconic. Orange County is where Ronald Reagan's from. It was Republican heartland. It was solid Republican. And the last election, it was a purple seat. It was flipped to Democrat. And the reason is that Latinos vote more in California than anywhere else, and they all vote Democrat. And they vote Democrat because Prop 187 back in the 80s was viewed by many Latinos. Prop 187 was a measure passed on the California ballot that said that the state would deny any services and any money to illegal immigrants of any kind, undocumented immigrants of any kind. And it was, first of all, it's really harsh, like medical care, education, gosh. And on top of that, a lot of Latinos in the state who were legal immigrants thought of it, the campaign was conducted in such a way that they perceived it as being like a racist, it was anti-Latino racist. And so they came out and voted, and the state has been blue ever since. Like California used to be a state that Republicans carried in elections until the 80s when Prop 187 came along, and the state's been blue ever since. And even the red parts of California have become bluer in recent years, right? But in theory, if you did the popular vote, like California's got, I want to say it's like 55 electoral votes. Like if it was like say 40-15, I mean that would still, the Republican would get more than he's getting now, right? I mean, if you were a Republican now, you're not getting anything from California. Under a popular vote system or a proportional system, you at least pick up some electoral votes, right? But of course, just like the Democrats going to get from Texas, right? I mean, you got to kind of balance that out.
Are you going to favor abolishing the winner take all?
I mean, I live in Florida, so it doesn't like my vote's always counted. So it's like weird for me to imagine, but I can imagine if you were from a state like what does Olivia want?
My vote doesn't count necessarily.
Why does your vote count? Wait, what?
Your vote counts.
I mean, Florida's winner take all, though.
Right? But like Florida, the candidate that wins Florida has won the election every time in the past like 100 years, except for like 3 times.
I was about to say, except for when I vote.
2000, but you voted Democrat. You voted Democrat, Dara, in 2008 and 12, and the Democrat won both of those times.
And I voted Democrat in 2016.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, we don't live in a state where it's like if we were Democrats living in Montana, our vote literally wouldn't matter. There's not enough Democrats to change the state's complexion.
I'm about to do something weird on the screen. I apologize for a moment.
What is happening?
I'm doing.
Something weird on the screen.
Well, what? No.
Chrissy wants to know how you feel about ranked choice.
So we'll talk about ranked choice, but yeah, I guess as a person living in Florida, my vote has always been important because whoever carries Florida typically wins. So like it matters how we vote. Whereas like North Dakota, for example, it does. Even if North Dakota goes Democrat in the next election, no one gives a shit. There's 3 people, 3 electoral college votes in North Dakota. It's less in Los Angeles, right? There's less of them in Jacksonville, Florida, right? And so I guess if I lived in a state that didn't count, proportional voting would be, it might make it more likely for a candidate to want to come and get my vote, right? If you lived in Austin, Texas, you've never had a Democrat come and try to get your vote because you're going to vote for them anyway, and they don't care because you're not going to outnumber the Republicans in Texas anyway. Whereas proportional voting would mean they might care, and popular vote, national popular vote would mean they would really care, right? I mean, they would really want to come and get you to come, because if all the big cities in the country came out and voted Democrat, like the Democrat would probably win, right? And so I guess a popular vote, and to be totally fair, there's a whole argument about like making people feel like their vote matters, because democracy, my favorite analogy that I use that I thought of myself, and I'm a freaking genius, is that democracy is like Tinkerbell. It works because we believe in it. It works because we believe it provides a authentic representation of our wishes reflected in the government. So in that instance, creating the popular vote is a way to tell people like everybody's vote matters, right? Like if you vote, it's going to go not into a series of 50 pots which might not matter. It's going to go into one big pot, and every vote for the Republican is like going to help him win, and every vote for the Democrat is going to help them win. Like, yeah, I think I maybe do support that. I think it would be a huge change. It would be the first election run under the popular vote only would be a free-for-all because nobody would know how to campaign. I mean, nobody would know. You know, we know today if you hire a campaign consultant in, like, if you're going to run in 2024 and you hire a campaign consultant in 2022 to help you run, he's going to tell you what you need to do. He's going to say, this is how successful campaigns work, and your campaign is going to be different than everyone else's because it's you. But there are some things that you're going to want to do, right? You're going to want to hire a field director in Iowa. You're going to want to start getting newspaper endorsements in New Hampshire. You're going to want to start taking out ads, and you're going to want to start going to the Iowa State Fair is coming up. You're going to want to be going to that so people can meet you. But I mean, the first election under the national popular vote would be like nobody would know what the fuck to do. It would be fascinating to watch people kind of figure out what is the smart strategy to what is the good choices to make, right? And so somebody asked about who asked about ranked choice voting. Chrissy asked about ranked choice voting is where when you vote, if there's multiple candidates, like let's say there's 4 candidates, right? And so okay, like a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, and a Green Party. Every person who votes lists the candidates in order of preference. And then in the election, we consider everybody's first choice. And if nobody has a clear majority, then we eliminate that person from everyone's ballot. And then all the people who voted for that candidate first, we move to their second choice. So in other words, if you vote A, B, C, D, and A does not win a clear majority, or what we do is we eliminate the lowest. Yeah, I'm sorry, I've had some shots. So let's say you vote A, B, C.
Also, math is not your strong suit.
I do fine. And so maybe. Oh, so it's like that. I understand. So no. So let's say you vote A, B, C, D, right? And so Absida. And so what happens then is we say, okay, well, nobody won a clear majority, right? Like the highest ranking candidate was like D with like 40%, right? But that's not 50% plus 1. So what we do is we eliminate the lowest ranking candidate off everyone's ballot. Right? We eliminate the person who got the least votes. And then anybody that voted for that candidate, if your first choice was A and A got the least votes, A goes away, and then we just count the votes again, right? And anybody who voted A, we count their second choice. And then we see who got the most vote. And if eliminating A means that a bunch of people who voted A ended up voting, enough of them voted D to get D across the finish line, well, then he wins. And if not, we eliminate the next lowest candidate, and then probably you'd only have to do it once or twice, right?
I feel like it would probably actually be a weighted thing.
I mean, it would be interesting because I don't know that it would affect a huge amount in terms of the outcome, but it would certainly make people feel like if you voted for a third-party candidate, you weren't basically throwing your vote away, right? Because of course, my friend, my longtime friend, and hold on, I gotta be mentioned it. My longtime friend, Enhard Budjerg, mentioned Duverger's law, which is a statistical analysis thing, and it's a political science thing. Duverger's law says in any system that is based on first past the post, where whoever gets 50% plus 1 gets everything, winner take all, Duverger's law says that favors the 2 big parties, right? And it makes sense because the 2 big parties have the most money to spend. So if you're going to vote, the voter going into the voting booth is going to tend to not want to vote for a candidate. Nobody wants to vote for a loser because then you feel like your vote doesn't matter. And if the election's close and you could have swayed the election, but you voted for Gary Johnson, and you're like, well, I shouldn't have voted freaking Gary Johnson because he's a complete dipshit or whatever. I mean, I'll be honest. If you watch the footage of the 2016 Libertarian Convention, Gary Johnson was the least dipshitty person there by a wide margin, including the Well, I mean, Gary Johnson, for example, wasn't the guy who showed up naked wearing a thong, and was all.
He's not naked.
It was a very small thong, so he was basically naked. Also, there was the guy who was mad the government makes you get driver's licenses, and Gary Johnson gave, I would describe, the least stirring defense of driver's licenses I've ever heard, where he was like, "Look, guys, like we're not going to convince voters that we like are good if we try to get rid of." And what he should have said is, "Look, you fucking morons, you're not going to convince voters to support our party if our position includes you don't need a license to drive a 2-ton car on the fucking highway. Stop being stupid." And instead, he was just like, well, driver's licenses are kind of... And he got shouted down by a bunch of morons who were like, we shouldn't have any government whatsoever. And it's like, we're not libertarians, you're anarchists, and you're stupid. Right? I'm sorry, if you're a libertarian watching the show, I'm glad, but I just cannot get behind libertarianism. It's nuts. right? It's just complete insanity. Well, if there's well, let me just say one thing about libertarianism. If libertarianism is so fucking great, name me a functional libertarian government right now, and there isn't one. So that's great. And if you say, oh, New Hampshire, it's like, yeah, New Hampshire, one of the 50 American states that gets generous subsidies from the federal government for things that it doesn't do on its own. And it's all fucking rich people from New York State that go live there because it's got lower taxes. So whatever, right? Yeah. But yeah, the problem is in American politics, Duverger's law holds true, and people tend to gravitate to the two parties they think have the highest chance of winning. Psychologically, no one necessarily wants to be associated with a losing party, and it's sort of a statistical thing. So yeah, it's been a long time since you had a genuine third-party candidacy. The last time I can remember a third-party candidate actually competing and getting more than double digits was like 1848. The Free Soil Party ran Martin Van Buren, former President Martin Van Buren. And so, yeah, mostly the third-party candidates act as spoilers, where like Theodore Roosevelt and Taft split the Republican vote. I guess that's the next one, 1912, where Theodore Roosevelt ran for the Bull Moose Party and Taft was Republican, and they split the vote so Woodrow Wilson could become president. Right? And so that was a big deal because the third-party candidate was a former president. So he actually had vote potential, right? As opposed to being some random person like Jill Stein that nobody's ever fucking heard of.
Evan says third parties need to work from the ground up instead of just coming out of the woodwork every 4 years. Heather Perry, the Youngblood, asks how you feel about Youngblood primary.
Okay, so Evan, there's an argument Evan is making that's true, where what you should do if you're a third party is take over a state. And like today, the U.S. Senate is 53-47. If the Libertarians took over New Hampshire and they elected 2 Libertarian senators, so let's say, I don't know New Hampshire senators, but let's say there's one from each party, so it'd be 52-46-2. Those 2 senators would be huge, right? Those 2 Libertarian senators would be able to say basically, anytime there's going to be a vote, if you can convince a couple Republicans to vote against the Republican bill, then we will too, if you give us something you want, right? If you include something in our bill, right?
Shaheen and Maggie Hansen, his son, who are both Democrats.
Both Democrats. Okay. Assume 2 Republicans became Libertarians somewhere, like I don't know, like Montana or something. That would be enormous, right? If 2 Republicans became Democrats, it would be 51-47-2, and that's like, if you could give it Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski to break ranks with the Republicans, the Libertarians could vote with the Democrats and stop any bill. And that's like, they would be the most important senators in the Senate. And so, yeah, you'd be, and of course, Libertarian, in order to get elected to the Senate, doesn't have to compete on the national stage. You just have to compete on the state, right? I mean, like a small state, you can win that.
I disagree. I think even though it's on the state level, the national parties will throw so much money.
Well, I mean, that's questionable though.
Mhm.
You can watch Bernie Sanders.
I mean, the states have a vested interest, or the big parties have a vested interest in not letting that happen, right? But I mean, you could, if you're a libertarian, you could become like, work your way up to the bottom of the state government and demonstrate that, like Gary Johnson. To be fair about Gary Johnson, he was the governor of New Mexico, and everybody liked him, right? Everybody was like, he was a pretty good freaking governor, and so he did kind of do that. Right? But of course, the problem is Gary Johnson didn't transform the entire government of New Mexico into libertarianism. That would, if the majority of the state legislature is libertarian and they're all voting libertarian, and the state functions well, then the libertarians could run Gary Johnson for president and be like, look, look, we have a record, like we've done some, like look at what we could do, right? And so that's the argument that Evan's making is if you take over a state, you not only demonstrate your governance, but also you might become the swing vote in a closely divided Senate, which would be huge.
You're gonna start from the local city council election.
Yeah.
But even then, the big money from the 2 main parties.
Yeah, of course. And everybody in those elections wants to get affiliated with, like, if you're running for city council, you want to be a Republican or Democrat because that opens the door to you getting lots of money, right? If you run as a third-party candidate or no party affiliation, there's a level at which you hit where all of a sudden it costs real money to campaign for something other than like school board, and like being a member of a major party gets you cash. Like the RNC might kick you 10 grand, which doesn't seem like much money to Joe Biden. But on the other hand, like if you're a school board candidate, that buys a lot of radio ads, that buys a lot of flyers, that buys a lot of newspaper ads. Yeah, and that's the problem, is that the parties have so much money because they have the big donors that they can basically stop that before it starts, right? But Evan makes a good argument that I've always also agreed with, that getting a party to sort of work from the bottom up. That was also the Free State Project, was libertarians picked New Hampshire, and they said basically, let's all agree to move to New Hampshire when like 16,000 libertarians sign up to do it, because that way we can all move to like a couple counties in New Hampshire and like basically like, you know, vote in the candidates we want and like kind of stage like a takeover of the state. And then we would elect like libertarian senators, congressmen, and a governor. And then we could like prove that, hey, like here's a libertarian state of functions. And also like, you know, like we would elect people who could help us get our agenda at the national level, right? The problem is then you end up with guys like Rand Paul, who is in some respects as libertarian as his dad, Ron Paul, but just figured it was better to run as a Republican from a Kentucky libertarian because he could get elected to the Senate at least at all. Bernie Sanders, who is kind of a democratic socialist, but runs caucuses with the Democrats so that he has some power and influence. Right, he became a Democrat because you can't run as a Democrat to get the Democratic Party nomination as not a member of the party, right? And so Heather asked about the jungle primary. That's California and is on the ballot in Florida. The jungle primary would be a primary election where instead of running a party primary, you'd run a single massive whopper primary. Now, some primaries are closed and open. A closed primary means that to vote in the primary to choose like the Democratic Party's nominee for president or Senate or Congress in your state, you have to be a member of that party at least like 30 or 60 days before the election. Depends on the state, right? And it makes sense. Shouldn't the Democrats pick their own candidates without outside input? The answer is kind of yes. On the other hand, if you're a registered independent, that basically locks you out of voting in the primaries, right? You only get the choices that the parties present you, right? At the end of the day, if you're an independent in a presidential race, you get this Republican and this Democrat, and you don't have any say. But of course, the counterpoint would be, well, if you want to get a say, join the freaking parties, right? Like you'll register as a Democrat, and then you can pick whoever you want, right? But an open primary is a primary where when you go to vote, they will let you vote in either primary, right? And so when you get a ballot, you say, I would like to vote in the Republican primary. They will give you a ballot with the Republican candidates, and you can pick whoever you like, right? And you choose. Now, Florida has a closed primary. You have to be a registered member of a political party to be able to vote in that primary election. And I think it's 30 or 60 days before, I don't remember which, right? The jungle primary, California adopted this last year. The jungle primary, all candidates who register for an election go in the same primary. All of them. And you end up with like a 12-person primary. But the top two vote getters face off in the general election, right? And so the general election in November is between the top two vote getters in the primary in the August or whatever, right? Or whenever the primary is, right? And so there's some questions about the jungle primary. On the one hand, in California, it was thought that it might force everybody to be a little more moderate. You're all competing for the same voters, right? I mean, you're all competing for the same group of people. And in California, the dominance of the Democratic Party and the marginalization of the Republican Party have contributed to the idea that the Republicans and Democrats tend to pick extremely liberal and conservative candidates. And if you're a moderate California voter, you got like a socialist and like an arch conservative, and you're like, I don't really like both of these candidates, right? And so the jungle primary was thought to empower moderate voters by giving, you could win by getting, like, you don't have to win a majority, you just have to win more than anyone else other than one person, right? So if you get like in a 10-person primary, if you get like 25%, you probably got first or second place, right? And like if all the moderate voters go for like Joe Smith, then he's probably going to be on the ballot in November, right? The negative of a jungle primary is that you can end up with two candidates of the same party facing against each other in the same election. So in Washington State, there was a jungle primary, and it had the treasurer, I think, in Seattle or something like that. And two Republicans won over several Democratic candidates. And so the voters in Seattle were like, we're pretty liberal, but our only choices are two Republicans. And the Republicans were like, well, the liberals split their vote among like 16 candidates. There were only two Republicans. We took half of each Republican vote. That was enough. That was like, that was 10% divided by two. That was way more than any Democrats got. And so I'm ambivalent about the jungle primary. I feel like I need more data. California's only adopted it like in the last presidential election cycle. I mean, it's like only relatively recently. And I voted against it in Florida. I was ambivalent enough about it that I decided not to change that. And I'm not a big fan of third parties. So I like a closed primary. I think if you're gonna be a Republican or Democrat, you should be in one of those parties if you're going to if you're going to want an opinion in the primary, right? And if you're mad that the Democrats like keep picking people you don't like, join the Democratic Party. You don't have to do anything other than just go to the DMV and say that you are one. But then you can pick whoever you like, right? And if and like I don't know, I appreciate that people don't like the fact that we have a two-party duopoly, and that's why people are registered independent and they like open primaries. But I also don't like the idea that in an election like 2016, an election like 2020, where the Republican nomination was virtually guaranteed to the incumbent president, a lot of Republicans in an open primary could go register as, go get the Democratic ballot and vote for whoever they wanted. And I think that's BS. I think that that's wrong. And the only way to prevent it is to have a closed primary where only people who are registered members of a party are allowed to vote in the party primary. And just change your registration like 6 months before the election. Change it back after if you don't want to be forever. But I think making people go through that step will discourage people from coming in. And in 2016, I want to say it was Rush Limbaugh who had Operation Chaos, where he urged Republicans in states with open primaries to specifically vote in the Democratic primary and pick the least popular candidate. I think he asked people to vote for Bernie Sanders, who he presumed would not win. And like that's exactly the kind of thing I think closed primaries prevent. Right, like that's exactly the kind of shenanigans that you can't do in a state with a closed primary. But that's my opinion, right? And the Florida having a jungle primary,
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Point to that one,
But make sure your mic is on. Can people hear you?
I'm going to mute you then because I don't want.
I don't want it to echo. Counterpoint to that, though, is if people do, like, if I.
I'm sorry, my bad. I'm not even making noise. I
Wow.
wasn't even talking.
Yeah, but you're the one that's on camera. I'm not on camera.
Rude.
Counterpoint to that, though, is that in an open primary, like I'm a Democrat. I'm very openly a Democrat. I'm very liberal progressive. In an open primary, I would at least be able to say there is not a chance in all of the Satan's Inferno that I would ever vote for this Republican candidate, and I could pull it towards a more moderate candidate that
True.
possibly could appeal more to centrists and things like that, which means that we could somehow end up with on the general election, not the primaries, but on the general election, we could actually end up with some more moderate candidates that would appeal to a much larger group of people as opposed to just the extremities of either system. And hang on to me a second while I switch back.
Tell me when.
Yeah. So Dara raises a good point. In an open primary, a Democrat might be able to say, I like the Democratic front runner, but there's a bunch of Republicans. I'll hop into that primary and vote for a candidate who I think I might consider voting for. And then you create the idea of like a genuine choice, right? Like it's two candidates instead of it being like an extremely liberal Democrat and an extremely conservative Republican. It's very partisan. And that's the argument for the jungle primary is that presumably that allows everybody's voting in the same primary.
Yeah, I'm against the jungle primary. Though.
Yeah, but I mean that's a big change. But I can appreciate that argument for an open primary. Like as I said, I like a closed primary because I think you should.
I might not be understanding this because I have not looked into this way, but with an open primary, it's just that there's a Democratic primary and a Republican primary, and I get to vote in both.
No, in an open primary, you get to pick one, and so when you go vote.
So I want to create my own primary system where all of the primaries are on my ballot, and I get to pick from all of the categories.
So it's not a jungle primary; it's a Jopen primary, where it's a jungle open primary, where every primary is separate by every party, but you get to vote in each one.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I want that.
But you're not a member. You're only a member of one party.
I don't care. I want to have a say.
All right. That's a novel interpretation.
I have a lot to
that's
drink.
I understand. No,
One tonight.
I've had a bunch of shots too.
Oh,
I mean, I'll have another shot if you guys have a shot. Drinks.
Where's your shot glass?
I don't know where anything is. What?
I have no idea what's going on.
Okay, so Chrissy is not in love with the phrase jungle primary. Heather says in a jungle primary, if it ended up with two Republicans, which definitely could happen in Florida, I couldn't bring myself to vote for either one. And Evan is thinking about the jungle vote.
Can you still see me on the screen if I sit? Is this okay?
Yeah, you're actually
Okay.
selling it.
So,
It's not really a stool though, just warning you.
what do you mean it's not a stool?
It is a stool for putting like a potted plant on.
I'm using it as a stool, so I believe it is a stool. So thank you.
It'll be awesome when the legs give out.
Yeah, I think
Just
its
go
maximum
ass over
weight capacity is
teacup.
something like 35 pounds.
It's doing great. We're doing great.
There's an ottoman.
He's holding his ass up.
It's holding. It's look. This is steady. Fine. This is fine. Everything's fine. Oh my God. Just kidding. Haha. So Chrissy is, I think, is not happy with the term jungle primary.
Hey, 10 ingredients in this apple cider are apple juice.
What kind of apple cider is apple juice?
It's fermented apple juice. It's just fermented.
It's not fermented. It's just.
I like to mix my own flavor. Cool.
Remember, if you're brown, you're in cider town. If
yellow.
if it's what is it? If it's clear,
If it's yellow, let it yellow. If it's brown.
no. It's if it's
Ew.
what is it?
Something juice.
Yeah, if it's I forget. It's what Flanders says to them when they're at the cider mill in The Simpsons. If it's brown, you're in cider town. Right? Hawk will comment. He'll know what it is. I'm too drunk to remember every Flanders quote. Stupid, sexy Flanders.
Have you seen Flanders without his shirt?
He's ripped. Stella.
He was in the shower and they blurted it out. He was
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
very.
Yeah. Long before the Superdome, where the Saints of Football play, there's a town where the damned call home, hear their hellish rondelay. That's the version of A Streetcar Named Desire from The Simpsons. That's one of the best episodes of The Simpsons.
Next week, I need to hit the liquor store.
Yeah. I will transform all of you dead-eyed suburbanites into white-hot grease fires of pure entertainment. Except you're not working out. I'll be playing your part. Bummer, man. Oh yeah, shots. Let me pour a shot. I got a couple shots left in
We're all
here.
gonna die, so drink.
All right.
Oh, Chrissy wants to know why it's called the jungle press.
Yeah. Okay. Shots.
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 Cheers, Sancha.
So it's called. I was going to address that actually. It like the term jungle primary is more like everybody just gets thrown, like rumble in the jungle. Everybody gets thrown in the jungle together. It's like everybody all at once, and you just kind of like it's a knife fight, survival of the fittest kind of a thing. Yeah, I don't. It does. There is an interpretation that, of course, jungle is like a coded reference to like Africans, and it's like, but I thought of it more as like everybody gets thrown into the sort of the arena, and you just knife fight it out, and it's one primary. So and the thinking was like in California, you know, the Republican primaries often are very fraught, but like they're not going to ever win. But now it's like, oh, you're a Republican. Well, everybody, you know, you might be a moderate Republican, and a lot of Democrats might like the cut of your jib, and they might. So like it forces even the liberal Democrats to be actually competitive, because now they don't just have to rely on the most committed party activists. A bunch of Republicans might come and vote for you too, and so it's like a more serious kind of like more threatening primary. I was actually sweating a lot, and there's like sweat on my nose. But no, yeah. If the fan was fixed, yeah, I know about the fan has been broken. You know what? Don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it. It's not that long. I don't even know. That's what she said.
Years of not feeling a cool breeze in
Okay.
the living room.
Is it? Yeah. Look, you're fine. He's fanning
I
you.
mean, it's literally just getting a ladder and taking.
And then scraping the thing off, and then spending 45 minutes on the phone. And then you have to scrape it off, because you have to send the thing on the letter that you print off from their website. And I just spent 45 minutes on the phone arguing with the guy that the stupid fan broke. And so actually what I'm going to
What
do.
do you think the chances of them honoring a warranty after it's been broken for 4 years?
I don't know, but I'm going to lie and say that it just broke.
Say,
And
I
now
think
you're
it's a
on-
fire hazard. Send me your fan.
Yeah, or I'm just going to go to friggin' Home Depot and buy another damn fan.
And then get one that's Alexa enabled if that's the case.
I mean, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll go to Home Depot and I'll buy that fan. Can you install that fan if I buy that fan? Okay.
As long as
Tim
they
can
have
help
a
me.
remote, Tim can help.
I know how to program the remote.
No, we know how to program the remotes. We know.
Oh, no, we had to return our.
No, we did our remotes. Yeah.
So I can do all of it except for physically lift it into place. I don't have the upper body strength.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bitch.
Not anymore.
So anyway, all right, whatever, it's fine. The fan is fine.
It's not fine.
It's not fine? Oh,
You
okay.
have a blanket on you.
You have a thick dog blanket on you.
Decide to gift me a new fan.
Exactly.
You're getting a new fan anyway. I'm going to go buy you a new dang fan.
It's Alexa
Throw a
enabled.
button in for
If they have that, I don't even know if that's a thing.
Probably.
It's just, well, I don't even know.
Okay, I'll search it. Don't worry.
Well, if it's on Amazon, of course I'll buy it. I bought her Entitled Goose Game this morning. So, honk honk, honk honk.
Feeling fan with light.
How much is that fan?
$194.
Fuck that. This one was like $50.
It was not.
It was not that much. I bought another one. We bought a bunch of them.
We bought 7 of them.
Yeah. Yeah,
All
yeah.
of the ceiling fans in the house. are
Yeah, because there's one out in the porch and one in the and there's one in the front room, one in my office, and there's one in all the bedrooms.
Well, you also gotta make sure it's not tiny little
Oh
blades.
come on! Like you would accept whatever.
There was a cool one in college that was like a circle, and when you turned it on and it spun, the blades like unfolded, and when you turned it off, they folded back together. And my roommate was looking at it, but it was like $150, and he was like, "Or I'll get this like $35 fan." Yeah, what's up?
The electrical.
Yeah. Do we have any questions?
Chrissy called you. It says "Okay, colonizer." I don't remember why that.
Oh, she called me a colonizer because of the jungle primary.
Oh, okay.
Here's one with Wi-Fi.
Okay. No, I know that it does sound. California has a term for it. Jungle primary is not what they called it on the state ballot. They called it like a comprehensive primary or like a total. So I don't know. But I appreciate that the term jungle primary might have connotations, but it's like it was sort of like more like everybody goes in the jungle and it's like a knife fight, right? It's not right. Like welcome to the jungle. It's not. I don't necessarily think it's intended as a coded reference to African Americans necessarily, right? She asked about one longtime fan of the show, Heather, asked about the jungle primary, which is on the ballots. Ballot 2 is amendment 2, 3. I don't know. I don't remember. What is 2? I heard a whole thing about 2. I thought it was 2.
Minimum wage.
2 is the sales. 2 is the minimum wage. 2 is the minimum wage. 2 is the minimum wage. It's not. Yeah, there's like 7. Always Florida it says 7.
Vote yes to increase the minimum wage.
Right,
$2.50 is ridiculous.
2 will increase the minimum wage to $15 by 2024, 5. But it's like a phase thing where they're going to raise it like 3 or 4 times, and then it'll top out. Which is, I mean, that seems reasonable. The minimum wage is pretty low. So and
$300 and something a week.
yeah, and I don't necessarily think. First of all, if you raise the minimum wage in Florida, you're not going to run every business out of operation because we all still need cheeseburgers and stuff in Florida, right? Like I still have to buy groceries, so they can't close the Publix, and probably.
Do you want to have a debate now, or do you want to make that for a separate show?
What do you mean?
I'd like to debate you on this.
The minimum wage? Well, I mean, like if you raise the.
This could be a whole separate
No, I
show.
mean like you, but like well, I mean I know that it would cut into the profits of companies. Like there's no question, right? They would probably not make as much money, but like it's not going to run Publix out of business. Publix still has to sell me groceries.
But
Hang on. Let me unmute you.
Yeah. Okay. No. Go. I mean, like go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
do
we're
it.
going completely off track and doing
We-
different.
I mean,
We're
that's fine.
way out of left field.
It's okay. We got 10 minutes left.
So corporations like McDonald's and Publix,
Right.
they don't pay their employees much.
Right.
And I agree, $8.50 is way too low.
And it would
Cost
obviously be a
increased
huge
on them because they would end up
cost
paying their
increase
employees an extra like
Yeah.
They do. They're going to limit the employees. They're going to put in the self-checkout lanes,
Right.
and they're going to put kiosks up in McDonald's, both which suck, and I hate them, and they should
Can
absolutely
I
have
argue?
live
Can I
people.
just point out to you that they are already doing that?
Yeah, they already,
Exactly.
They already doing
So if you make minimum wage $15 an hour, they're going to cut more people, put in more self-checkouts, and more self-serve kiosks. I think it's going to cost jobs.
possibly.
And it's going to cost entry-level jobs. There's going to be the whole
Yeah.
Texify, which
Yeah.
need to support those.
Yeah, but those guys are
Technology.
making minimum wage.
No.
Yeah.
Just remember, I mute you when he's talking. So
Yeah. Okay.
Part of me says $15 an hour for the guy taking my order behind the counter. McDonald's, is that really a $15 an hour job?
I mean, the question is not whether or not it's actually a $15 an hour job. It's by definition, the minimum wage is supposed to be the minimum amount of money that you need to make in order to have the basic necessities of living. And we are not reaching that.
I
mean,
heartily agree. $8.50 an hour.
Matt wants his microphone not to be
$8.50
muted
an
anymore.
hour is
Should we just
absurd.
leave him muted so that he can torture?
Rude.
Okay.
Rude.
No. $8.50 an hour is absurd. I felt that increasing that $1 a year up to $15 an hour by 2025 is too much too soon.
I mean, I appreciate.
Wait. You have to let me actually unmute you.
Now you can talk.
Okay. No, I appreciate your point in that we're in an age where a lot of the $8 an hour retail jobs could be automated, and your point I think stands where Publix might say, okay, well if we're gonna have to pay all the customers, or if I'll pay customer service people $8 an hour, like or $15, we'll just replace them with kiosks, right?
Company like Publix that also hires,
Yeah, lots of people like
but adult. I don't want to say stuff. I mean, it's-
yeah, like they hire people with the disability. Yeah, they might not do that. But on the other hand, I guess the counterpoint would be A, they're already going to do it anyway, so we might as well make sure the jobs that they don't get rid of are better. And B, not every, like the guy behind the meat counter and like the stock boys and stuff couldn't all be replaced with robots, and the servers that serve your food couldn't all be replaced with robots. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and of course, the bigger question you're getting to is what are we going to do about the automation of our economy, where a lot of jobs where I talk to you and you input a computer, right? Where I speak to you and your job is to take my words and like ring up my shit at Target or whatever. We're getting rid of those jobs anyway. And so like, what's the economy going to look like when every high school kid who goes to get a job, like 60% of the jobs they would have competed for don't exist because most, when you go to get work at a restaurant, you don't take orders anymore. You're just a busboy and you serve, the.
But the cashier at McDonald's
It's designed for a 16-year-old kid in high school, but that's a great job for a 16-year-old kid in high school.
Yeah, but let's be honest. These days, it's not necessarily
Yeah, I
a
mean,
16-year-old kid in high
Economy
school.
blew up in 2009. I stopped getting pizza deliveries from high school kids, and I started getting pizza deliveries from like 35-year-old dudes. And so, and some of those jobs we can't, like, there's no self-driving cars. So as soon as the self-driving car arrives, Domino's will invent a self-driving car where it has a bunch of pizzas, and they load it at the.
I have a point, but I want
Okay.
you to finish.
No, they will load it at the store, and it'll drive to your house and text you a code, and like a QR code, and you scan it, and it'll like open the slot with your pizza. And they don't need a delivery driver at all, and they will do away with that.
Are
Yeah.
you figuring into the mail industry?
I mean,
The mail industry, not yet, because the mail carrier still has to put my mail in the slot and give me packages. But on the other hand, in big cities where they feed it into a standardized post office box, like they might be able to get rid of the mail carrier in that specific context altogether. Dara is freaking out.
I want to talk, but I want to mute you so that I can talk, because I want to point out that and I guess I'll split screen it. Instead of just saying, like we're going to automate these things, but we're still going to just like increase our profit margin by not having to pay for people to do that job, you should automate these things and then charge people a fair rate of what things actually cost now that you're not paying for the manual labor. Then if the cost of living decreases, maybe you don't have to increase the minimum wage because it won't cost so damn much to live. And now Tim wants to counterpoint. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, Dara's making a point about.
You're muted. You can't talk.
Between the rich is what I'm saying.
I mean, am I on?
You become rich, and then you're gonna say,
I will never be rich enough that somebody wants to guillotine me.
No, I mean, am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
No, I mean, Dara's making a point about excessive profits. Like at some point, if we automate if we raise the minimum wage,
Oh, I'm still on screen drinking my fireball.
whatever. I'm on screen too, drinking my wine. Drinking my
I
wine.
don't want to be on screen.
But Dara's making a point about excessive CEO profits, where like surely like the CEO of McDonald's makes like a bullshit amount of money every year, and that guy doesn't really do anything. I mean, you're the CEO of McDonald's. It's like, what do? Keep making hamburgers and fries, bitches. Like, should you get $20 million for that? Who gives a fuck, right? You're like, give me more French fries. Bring back the McFlurry. And so the argument,
Is released from the vault.
McRib again.
We have suddenly found the McRibable.
Yeah, Moon Man, Arch Deluxe, baby. What's that? Yeah, Arch Deluxe, which was huge. And remember, by the way, I'm not lying. I'm not lying. I want to say it was Burger King tried to make a third of a pound hamburger to compete with the quarter pounder with cheese, and Americans didn't understand that a third of a pound hamburger was more hamburger than a quarter pounder, but the number 3 is less than the number 4. So like, but a quarter pounder is 1/4 of a hamburger, 4 is bigger than 3, and it's like, yeah, but that's less than a 25% is less than 33%, and so Burger King had to drop the third of a pounder with cheese. They had to drop it, and so
That's the Pulp Fiction, or is that the only
No,
they,
but-
they were talking about the Royale.
Royale with cheese. In France, they call it a Royale with cheese. It's a Royale with cheese. But that's how stupid we are as a country. As I just want to say that. But yeah, Dara's making a point about like surely when you're paying the minimum wage workers more money, the money wouldn't necessarily automatically be added to the price of the goods. It would be deducted from the wages of the ridiculously overpaid CEOs. But Tim is also freaking out. What is Tim going to say?
Capitalism.
Yeah.
Wait.
What?
I'm
Oh my
sorry.
God.
I was just.
Can I have a Cheeto?
Cheetos. I was distributing Cheetos. Go ahead, Tim.
You just told, I'm sitting on it. It's a seat.
No, I keep telling her it's not a seat.
I'm
So
not
you,
sitting on it. Give me a
I
Cheeto.
thought she's pointing at the wine opener. Don't sit on that.
Give me a Cheeto. I want a Cheeto. Give me some Cheetos. Give
all right,
me-
Tim, you have the mic.
So, but if we are a capitalist society,
I'm not necessarily saying we should be a
Companies
capitalist society,
companies
though.
can earn as much as they want, pay their CEOs whatever they want,
Well,
and they would say that you want the most talented individual to run the company, and if you limit how much they can make, then they're going to go somewhere else.
yeah, I mean, but like,
Wait.
Ultimately,
I'm sorry.
any expenses are going to be passed on to the customer, not necessarily, if the minimum wage worker is still going to make $15 an hour, the expenses associated with that are going to be passed on to the customer. People are not going to be paying $10 for a Big Mac. I mean, that's why a lot of manufacturing is sent overseas because, listen, I don't want to pay $200 for my Birkenstocks to be made here in America. I want my Birkenstocks. I'm just saying, like,
No, it's cheaper
You know,
than
Made in
trying to.
China and the
I'd rather
transport
pay
costs are.
my wreaths. I'd rather pay $35 for my wreaths that are made in China versus $75 for my wreaths that would be made here in America. And that most people say they want a fair system, but they don't want the cost of their goods to double.
Yeah,
I mean, that's. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, the other problem I would argue is that at the end of the day, who adds the most value to the shares of McDonald's? Is it the CEO or the dude selling me fries? Because frankly, if the CEO died in a fire right now, I don't care. He's an idiot.
Unless you're a shareholder.
Well, unless I'm a shareholder, but like, when did we decide that those are the most important? Well, I mean, we decided those are the most important people because capitalism. But at the end of the day, if you're a shareholder at McDonald's, the people that make your company valuable aren't the CEO. He's a dipshit. The people that make your company valuable, right? He's actually caught.
So,
But I'm-
the point that Heather and Karen have asked is, does this actually need to be a constitutional amendment?
Well, we'll talk about that. But like the guy that makes my McDonald's shares valuable is Bob over there pushing fries at the drive-thru because he actually makes me money. The CEO, remember, United CEO went on the TV and was like, the fact that we beat the fuck out of a guy on our plane is not a big deal because he was reaccommodated, and it was like, A, you just took a shit on the company, but B, the people that make United valuable are the pilots and stuff that fly the planes.
But the current administration sees the stock market as the value of success of the economy.
Well, they're stupid.
So,
I mean, the current administration sees that. I don't know if
I came up with the two
No.
of you.
but the stock market is a ridiculous proxy for the total overall health of the.
Increases the stock price.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah,
not
but
that's not a good economic. That's
I'm saying that's the current
The current
Well, they're
administration
dumb.
uses-
I mean that's come on. The
I mean,
stock
that's-
market's not an actual proxy for overall total success of a company. A company Enron had a good stock price until it was revealed to be completely a bullshit company, right? Am I right? Amazon.
We can't get Tim drunk and talk about capitalism.
Amazon had a shit stock price for like 25 years. Amazon had
Money and red.
Amazon had a shitty stock price for like 20 years.
Great.
For
I know
like,
you're doing that.
damn, can I?
No.
But Amazon had a shit stock price for like 20 years, and like they're a world-beating company. Well, they weren't making a profit because Jeff Bezos was buying everything, and now all of a sudden he's not buying everything; he's selling everything, and he's making some money. So there's an argument to be made that the overall business plan of a company should not be tied to the short-term expectations of quarterly stock projections. Is what I'm saying. Amazon is a perfect example of a company that well, you can't tie it to a 6-month or like a 4-month quarterly stock projection. You can't just say, or 3-month. You can't just say that your company's only as valuable as your latest stock projections, because Amazon clearly is a company that defied that. Like Tesla is another company that has going to have terrible stock numbers for years, but eventually when they start producing Teslas, they may end up becoming the world's most valuable car company. And everybody's going to end up saying, I guess the stock market doesn't actually matter if you have enough money to get your company through the time when you're building the company and having low stock prices to the point where you suddenly become a dominant company in an emergent tech field, right? So anyway,
Jungle primaries.
No. What did were people talking about CEO pay as a constitutional amendment?
There's actually been a lot of conversation.
Okay.
Apparently they are just as heated about this as we
No,
are.
this is some heated shit. This is some heated shit. This is no. This is
Apparently,
yeah.
yes, it's some really heated
No.
shit.
What did people had questions?
Whether or not this should be a constitutional
On the one hand,
state amendment
yes and no.
situation.
If it was a state amendment and the state capped CEO pay, everybody would.
No, the minimum wage.
Oh, the minimum wage.
Should be a state amendment.
Yeah.
Did the state amendment say only to
Government contractors and their employees, or statewide?
No, it's statewide. It would say yeah. It's if you're employed in this.
You do state contractors, other companies follow suit, but it's not.
Sometimes, but not every. Yeah, not always. Yeah, the current Florida minimum wage amendment 2 is everybody in the state. So it would be every minimum wage employee in the state of Florida. And so I don't know. The argument you could make, a la James Madison, is let the states do it. And like some states could move, some businesses could move, right? I mean, there's some businesses that would pick up and move to a state that didn't have a minimum wage. But like at some level, if you're going to sell me fast food French fries in Florida, you can't like outsource that to Georgia. Bob has got to be pushing them fries to me through the drive-through, right? And so there's always going to be some jobs that are locally situated in the state of Florida that end up getting hit with the minimum wage rise. So you could see like, does it wreck the economy of the state? And then like you could have you'd have data. You could say, okay, look, raising the minimum wage to $15 really did dramatically affect retail jobs, point of sale jobs in the state of Florida. I'll Tim's suggestion, they turn everybody into a kiosk, right? So if Florida raises the minimum wage to $15 and every person that can be a kiosk is a kiosk, then the state of Georgia would be like, maybe we won't do that. So I guess that would be my argument why let the states do it state by state. And if a bunch of states do it and it doesn't blow up the economy, presumably there would be pressure on the other states to do the same thing.
Well, I mean, there would also probably be a ripple effect to that, though, with more people end up on unemployment, not able to find a job.
Yeah, that would be a problem too.
And
Yeah.
then, you know, and then you get let me unmute
myself because I get into my
brother's
brother's big thing here. Of then you end up with a situation of like, do you need to start subsidizing people's incomes because there's so many people on unemployment because there's not actually, you're muted. There's not actually enough jobs out there for people who don't have any sort of like upper level job skills. Because honestly, let's be honest, even my job, like I manage, Facebook and I teach some kids how to bake and history and things like that. But eventually there's going to be a point where all of that is even automated and nobody wants to do that sort of thing. Like you have to end up being this really niche thing in order to like have a job. Like, realtors might end up being obsolete because you can just go onto Zillow or whatever and buy a house with rocket loans or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm drunk
That's
and
a whole other
rambling.
discussion.
That's a whole nother
Well, I
discussion.
mean, like
Fuck
also,
Zillow.
Like most banal legal things can be done.
They're your local realtor, please. I know a good one if you're in the area.
So yeah, I tend to think, it's really hard to predict the outcome of doing something like that, because I think Tim is not wrong when he says any job that can be automated, companies might decide to just go ahead and if the cost of automating it is less than the cost of paying the increased minimum wage, then they're going to be like, let's get some fucking kiosks, right?
I was gonna make the argument that it's not just wages, it's like benefits and stuff, but
Yeah.
you should look at benefits anyway.
No, if you're a minimum wage worker, you
We'll
probably
figure out how to make sure that you don't qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah. From employment, so you don't get benefits anyway.
yeah. There's a whole law.
That's-
New York has laws against that kind of scheduling too, where the companies aren't allowed to give you 39 and a half hours a week and be like, well, you're not a full-time employee, huh? Right? Are there other questions in the thing?
Karen points out that point with the 30-hour work week. I'm sorry, I have to scroll up a little. Yeah, 50 years, you might need to raise it to $30 an hour, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, well, inflation.
I read her.
That's our
I thought
case
she
problem,
posted something about a 30-hour work week. Yeah, the Karen says right now that people will avoid having to do that by having a 30-hour work week. So they don't have to
Yeah.
do benefits.
Yeah, there's some name for that, and New York passed a law banning it in a while. Some boroughs or something I maybe did. I don't remember. But that's hard because the company might be like, well, if we can't, that's like Walmart does that to retain profitability. And if you do that, like Walmart might suddenly become profitable, and the company might and then if Walmart closes, all those people who you tried to get better jobs for now are unemployed. And so like that's the ultimate argument is if you end up, but at some level though, the counter argument is like you can't get rid of all jobs, right? I mean, I can't even if the local restaurants have to raise their prices, I'm still going to want to eat out, right? Like a hamburger would have to be $30 before I would decide I would rather cook one myself.
Dude, you eat $30 hamburgers.
And Orsay only, right? But I also eat $5 hamburgers and $10 hamburgers and $50 hamburgers and $17 hamburgers and $19 hamburgers. I eat a lot of $9 hamburgers at the Loop. No, I'm a hamburger. I love a hamburger. I'm a hamburger gourmand. I know a lot about hamburgers. If I know any food product, it's hamburgers and mac and cheese and grilled cheese sandwiches and French fries and chicken. Mountain Dew. and Mountain Dew. Well, I surprisingly found Diet Mountain Dew not to be that bad, actually. So that's the thing.
We're
Also,
talking about food deserts.
food deserts.
And how Karen mentioned there could also be fast food deserts as well as grocery store deserts too.
yeah, well, there could be a place where it's not feasible to open casual dining or fast food, right? And then you end up in a. I knew a guy that ended up moving to White Plains, New York, after college, and his friends reported to me that the only place to eat was apparently Chili's or Applebee's, and they were like, so if you wanted to go out, it was Applebee's to eat or Applebee's to go, or you cooked in your house, and I was like. I didn't believe that was true, but I mean, I assumed that they were not morons and were capable of like looking for other places to eat in the local White Plains, New York area, right? But yeah, you might end up in a place like if you're a bedroom community, like all those. I flew to Washington D.C. and drove through Maryland to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a couple years ago, and we went through all these little towns that are clearly bedroom communities where it's a fucking lot of condos and then a grocery store and like a couple of nice restaurants because everybody in the town gets up, goes to the Starbucks, goes to work in Washington, D.C., comes home, goes to the grocery store, goes to the nice restaurant, and goes home. So, yeah, like a fast food restaurant might not actually exist in that town, right? I mean, like, it might very well be that the local fast food joint is like, no one is here during the day. So there's not enough demand to justify us opening a McDonald's or a Wendy's or whatever. And so, yeah, you might end up in a weird, then whatever calculation they use to justify the opening of their business might not apply in a particular location. But then if you're a person that works from home in that community, right, if you get a condo in that community and you're like on Amazon or you have my job where you teach over Zoom because COVID, there's like nowhere to eat, right? Like you can't just go out in the middle of the day and get lunch because there's literally no place in your town that is open unless it's dinner time when all the people come home from commuting from the big city, which is that's actually possible, right? When I used to teach night classes way back in the day in 2005, 6, 7, 8, not a lot of places were open when I would come home from work. I would get out of my class at 8:45. 24 hours.
Multiple communities.
They were the place to go because
There's nothing else to do. Yeah. And so they ended up becoming the everything. Yeah. And so, yeah, I used to come home from work at 8:45 and Dara would be like, hey, can you pick up some food? And I would be like, well, these two places are open. So like it was like Checkers or McDonald's.
I like Checkers.
And we like Checkers. So no, Checkers is fine. Double check, 2 checker burgers, the cheese plain, and a large fry. No, the Checkers fries aren't, yeah.
Okay, so I'm sure my friends. Karen points out when she said a 30-hour work week, she actually meant that as a goal of we should have, a 30-hour work week should be what's considered working full time. I forgot I put them over there. As opposed to
This
that
isn't a
is
stool. This is a fucking stool.
that's a stool for like putting
It's a
things
stool
on,
if
not
you
a stool
believe
for
it's a stool.
sitting.
I believe.
It's a stool.
Give me some Cheetos.
Oh, hang on.
I mean,
Give me the ball.
210.
It's fine.
Give
me some Cheetos.
I'm sorry, it
some
doesn't help
Cheetos.
that we're all rambling because we're a little bit
Give me some Cheetos. All right,
intoxicated.
this is cool.
Um,
One more.
She also says that full time is probably it's probably even less hours than 30 for being a full time employee.
But for
It's-
salaried employees, it's probably much more than 40.
yeah, salary is more than 40, probably it's like 50 or
So-
something like that, and
Whereas
being
not
full
30.
time is probably something like even less than that they give you hours for in order to get. And then Heather points out the when you get a promotion but not a raise because you have to prove yourself first. And Hawk says he left for a moment. The topic has changed rather significantly. Yeah, that's what happens when you.
baby. I mean, we had a lot of wine here.
I had no wine. I had a lot of liquor. You want to wrap up the electoral process in the state?
Yeah, so
I think Corey needs some more liquor.
If I drink more, I will be asleep. And then there's pictures apparently that turn off.
Listen, there's pictures of y'all in front of us.
I mean, it was. I don't know anything about it or whatever. No. Oh.
There's pictures of paper.
I mean, you do what you have to do.
Yeah. No. I mean, I know a lot of. I mean, people selling feet pics.
All right, wrap this up.
I mean, I don't. Whatever. Like, if people have there's questions, please let us know. Thanks again to our Patreon subscribers and our longtime in-person audience.
I don't think we've missed an episode.
Please like and share our video.
Yeah, like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube or Facebook channel.
If you're not able to financially support us, please try and get other people to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have 13 subscribers on YouTube, so if you want to subscribe on YouTube and get my numbers up, that'd be great. Those are rookie numbers.
We have more numbers
That's the thing is a lot of people like me on Facebook, and that's fine. That's fine. I got a lot of Facebook fans.
Almost all of our live watchers are on Facebook.
Yeah, no, Facebook is where the action is, but YouTube doesn't generate a lot of comments. But if you have a suggestion for a topic, please comment. I would be happy to try to address some stuff. Please, but also I know like my former student Justin commented a bunch of really fucking detailed topics last week, and I was like, it was before the other one.
We will probably
Be here next week, but we'll probably take Halloween off because
Is next week?
trick-or-treating
Is 2 weeks Halloween? No. Yes. Shit.
Yeah,
Seven-
Evan will kill you if you don't
There's
do it next
three.
week.
There's 3 weeks till Halloween.
Yeah, so Evan Burner,
No,
I know you're
there's-
watching because you commented just recently. You need to decide what topic you want him to talk about next week.
There's 3 weeks till Halloween, right?
Is it 3 weeks
Yeah,
from
it's the
Halloween?
10th, so it's the 17th, and then like 20 something, and then okay. Because holy shit, my classes are fucked if it's 2 weeks to Halloween.
No, you're right. It's 3 weeks.
Yeah,
So we'll probably be in the
holy
next
shit.
2 weeks and then off for Halloween.
No,
Because
we got some problems.
if we're not trick or treating,
American
we're going to be
history,
watching
too.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Could you solve them?
Because
I've only covered half of World War I this week in 2 classes, and we really needed to cover.
What do you want to vote?
And we asked him, he's nowhere to
He's gone. He flips houses in Chicago now. So woo,
it's not his camera, it's mine.
so yeah. So I have some problems. I have some problems in my my Zoom classes if we're not. It's a spam call at 9:49.
It's 8:15. It's only
I got one this week from 1-800-000-0000.
Where it says subscribe.
The
Paranorman is a great Halloween movie. I love that one. Also, Frankenweenie.
Frankenweenie is a pretty good movie. I will accept but I mean Hocus Pocus is obviously your favorite Halloween movie.
Well, that's mine, but if we're watching.
No, Frankenweenie and Paranorman were both good. Those are good movies. We got to watch those at some point.
There's a lot of good Halloween movies.
But tomorrow we got to watch princess movies.
Tomorrow we told her we would do Princess.
Man, fuck a princess movie. I've seen so many fucking princess movies. Can a princess movie be about like Princess Leia or Princess Buttercup?
I mean, you can talk to her about that one, but I feel
That's a good. As you wish.
Book of Life is also a good movie, and I like the music.
Yeah, Book of Life was a solid movie. That was a solid movie. Would 10 out of 10 would watch again.
I mean, I watched Coco the other night by myself.
Coco, okay. Coco, also a good movie.
We refuse to let Lucas watch it. He's too sensitive.
It's a good movie though. It was a sad movie, but it was a good movie.
Yes, do you not know Lucas?
I don't know. We're not on camera. He's on camera.
No, I mean Lucas might be. Well, the real problem is always he might enjoy it, but also be emotional about it, and then you have to comfort him. So the consequence of any movie that you would have to comfort is: are you willing to pay the price of having to like comfort him as he sobs hysterically over that movie? So the answer is no. I was told The War Horse is safe to watch because the horse doesn't die.
I'm
'Cause
not
that-
watching it anyway.
Because
I don't watch the movies about dogs.
no, but the girl told me in class that it was okay because it was sad, but in the end it's happy because the kid and the horse are reunited, so it's safe to watch.
I
And I
watched
was like.
Marley and Me, and I'm never watching
Okay.
another dog movie.
Because there's a movie. Do you know that card game I have with the Grizzled that we played a bunch of times? There's a game that the same dude's made on Steam called The Valiant Heart, and it's about a guy and his dog in World War One. And I bought it because I like World War One games, and it's by the guys that made the Grizzled. It's a fucking good game. But I didn't play it because it's about a guy and his dog in World War One, and I'm like, oh my god, the dog dies, and I would cry. And they were like, no, it's fine. The dog doesn't die. You can play that game.
But what about John Wick?
John Wick is sad. His dog dies.
And then he murders everybody that
But it's still his dog still
I
dies.
won't watch that movie because
No, the dog is a little puppy.
But it's so fun to watch him murder.
Well, yeah, and 2 and 3 don't.
The audience is enjoying being part of some
No.
candid conversation.
No, 2 and 3 don't have a dog related, dog death related. Look, Fang, come here. No, come here.
Very upset when you touch him.
No, it's a
I
Fang.
don't want to be touched. Oh, Fangy.
He's got the tail going.
It's like John Wick 4.
No, John Wick 4. John Wick 4 is the thing. It's happening. They're filming.
I don't
It's
think
so.
the guy that punched Rick Moranis.
As he should.
He should. Whoever punched Nick Moranis is
Yeah.
an asshole.
Yeah. You can also watch. There was a show that's on HBO about. It's a calming show about people talking about calming things. And one of the episodes features Keanu Reeves lecturing you about trees. And it's supposed to be like it's a calming, relaxing experience where he gives you a lecture about trees. And I feel like he would recommend the Richard
What was the movie with Keegan Michael Key and
Keanu.
Is it just called?
It's
Keanu?
called Keanu, where they had their cat is called Keanu, and the gangsters kidnap the cat, and they have to rescue the cat, and the cat is voiced by Keanu Reeves. Yeah, who recorded cat sounds.
Meow.
No, the cat is very cute. The cat is really cute. Whoa. But I feel like if you watch the TV show where Keanu Reeves lectures you about trees, he would recommend Richard Powers' novel The Overstory, which I believe was a finalist for the National Book Award last year and is about trees. And it's supposed to be pretty good. I have it.
Any final words you want to say?
Um,
Can I say some electoral process before we say goodnight?
No, I feel like I should always recommend, if you care about the elections of the of the 20th century, please read Rip Perlstein's epic series of books, Buried Goldwater and the Unmaking of the American Consensus Before the Storm, Nixon Land, The Rise of a President and the Fracturing of a Nation, The Invisible Bridge, and Reagan Land, which are excellent books about what's that?
World War Theme Parks.
Nixon Land and Reagan Land. But those are really solid books. I don't really have it. But if anyone has any comments, suggestions, please let us know. I would love to cover some more topics that I can tell you about. If there's something in the news that is interesting, I do follow the news pretty well. So if there's like a thing going on and you want me to talk about it, fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh, right, Armenia and Azerbaijan, it blows again, backed by Russia. Let me know the detention of the. Let me know about the detention of the Uyghurs, right? The ongoing political crisis in Thailand related to the monarchy. An excellent opportunity to talk about women wearing thongs, eating dog food out of bowls, or guys with tattoos and mesh shirts. So the current Vajiralongkorn, Longhorn, the current king of Thailand, involved in a political crisis, and also again the royal mistresses eating food out of dog bowls wearing G-strings is the thing that could come up in a lecture about that. But if you just let us know. It's fucking wild. By the way, mentioning those things in Thailand could get you a prison sentence. And yet the king routinely appears wearing mesh T-shirts. That's like, what?
Is Istanbul Constantinople?
No, it's Constantinople. It's Constantinople. Fuck it.